1 second, I just had to.
We only have
I wanted
one
to make sure I
girl,
was
so-
on the right screen for Andy.
I don't care about it.
See it.
Let's see.
All right.
Go ahead.
Call the work session of the fiscally exempted village schools meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Fox, will you read the attendance of the Board of Education members, please.
Amber Drum,
Here.
Teresa Dunaway.
Here.
Richard Mames,
Here.
Simon Patry,
Here.
Ann Zakor.
Here.
We're all present and accounted for. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Fox. And next item on the agenda here, or really the beginning of the agenda, is the approval of the agenda at 1C. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second, any discussion? Having no discussion, and ready to, all right,
Waiting for the board member,
all
sorry.
right, go ahead, Mr. Stefanik.
We have a need that came up on Friday, a need for a quick executive session at the end of the board meeting for reasons G1, the employment and the investigation of a complaint against an employee and matters that need to be kept confidential by federal and state law.
Did we want to proceed with the vote or did we want to go ahead and, I don't want to adjust the changes till we have the vote, correct?
So it's adding it pursuant to policy 166 and Ohio Revised Code 121.22 G1. And the grounds are
regarding the employment of a public employee and investigation of a complaint against a public employee.
Who's gonna be in that meeting besides superintendent and the board? Is there anybody else? No turn? Anticipated action? Okay.
All right. And specifically as to G1, Mr. Stefanik, you said to consider, is it the osmosis discipline promotion or discipline
The
employment?
down at the very bottom, there's a piece about the investigation of a complaint against a public employee. So it's that one.
So the investigation of charges against a public employee.
Yes.
I can grab that language if you want me to put that in. I can,
I'm
the
actually
last meeting.
drafting it right now. We'll go ahead and move to amend the agenda. Add an item. It's under, I guess what would become 3A, new business. And that item would be to recommend actions to adjourn to executive session pursuant to policy 0166 or the Board of Education policy 0166 and Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1 to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee. Is there a second to that motion to amend?
I second that motion.
So, motion to amend, agenda by Pat and Means. Did you need more time to add that, Mrs. Fox?
Where's that? At the beginning, so adjourn to executive session for purposes authorized.
Board of Education policy 0166. And ORC 121.22G.
Okay. I have Patry and I have Maines.
Any discussion on the amended motion to approve the agenda?
So we're adding a second one too. Is there just one item? Period.
So, yeah.
Okay, just
So miscellaneous,
clarifying.
if it passes, miscellaneous would become 4A. And then that would fall under 3A new business.
Right. I will amend that as soon as we take the vote.
Any questions or discussion?
Wait, so I think you said that backwards. This is always after executive session to read.
Yeah, miscellaneous is 4.
Right, okay,
New bid or executive session is 3.
3A.
yeah, gotcha.
Patry,
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Dunaway,
Yes.
and Zakor.
Yes.
Next item on our agenda is item 2A, retirement. It's a discussion item. Mr. Stefanik.
Just want to announce to the board that we received retirement notifications from Teresa Murr, administrative assistant to the intermediate principal, and Lynn Hutchison, administrative assistant to the elementary principal at Broadway Elementary. Appreciate the years of service from both Ms. Murr and Ms. Hutchinson. And wish them lots of relaxation time and wellness in their retirement years.
And are you wanting us to take action on this? It says recommend action, but it's on our discussion item, so I'm guessing you want us to do a motion. Is that right?
Yes, for this. Initially, it was put on here because one of the two secretaries had a date on there that was before the end of the school year, and then revised the date to say that she would finish out the school year. So we put it on here today because we want to make sure that we could have the school covered if she retired before the end of the school year. But we're glad that both of them will stay through the end of the year activities.
Is there a motion to approve the?
I move to approve the retirements.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you and enjoy.
Yeah, lovely ladies. Thank you guys so much for everything. Thank you.
I can imagine how many kids they've
I
seen
know.
go through here.
I
It's kind
know,
of
they've
crazy.
just always been so nice to me in the office, so
Mrs. Ward, do you have any discussion?
No. Thank you.
Mr. Maines?
Thank you very much.
I would like to echo the gratitude. Thank you very much for your service. All right. Any other discussion? Ready for the call?
Zakor,
Yes.
Dunaway,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
and Patry.
Yes. Next item on the agenda to be open enrollment discussion. I would yield over to Mr. Stefanik and believe it's Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith? Hi, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Afternoon. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me well enough?
Yes, we can. We can. Well, let me give you a quick introduction and then it's all yours.
Okay.
We are very privileged to have Mr. Andrew Smith from the Ohio Department of Education. His official title is Area Coordinator for Area 2 in the Office of Field Relations. We brought him in because he came highly recommended by Dave Stevens as someone that has a background not only with open enrollment, but various financial operations through the Ohio Department of Education. So without further ado, welcome to the Tipp City Board of Education meeting, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Before I get started, just a little background on myself. I spent 36 years in education, half of those as a teacher coach and the other half as an administrator. So 16 of those years I was a superintendent. The closest I was to Tipp City would have been in Mercer County. And that's where I retired from before they asked me to take this position. I became aware of your discussion a couple of years ago, and Mr. Stevens did call me. We did have discussions. So I'm going to assume, for the sake of, I guess, efficiency, that the political reasons that go into whether or not to accept open enrollment kids has been something that you've discussed, and that's not my purpose here. My purpose is mostly the financial, although I will assure you that I've had my share of the political things come my way. When I was first contacted, the way in which open enrollment funding worked was there was a state foundation amount, and at the last year in fiscal 20 that you had, it was $6,020. And so that foundation amount, if a student had open enrolled into Tipp City, you would have received that money, and you would have also received any career tech funding money that would have followed that child because they were enrolled in a career tech class. Open enrollment money at that time, special education weighted funding did not follow the student. So you didn't receive that. However, you never had a situation in which you lost money on an open enrolled special education student into your district, because if for some reason you didn't receive as much money to educate that child as it cost you to do so, there's another fund of money, it's excess costs, and you filed for those from the resident district, and they would have had to make up the difference. So basically, in the case of an open enrolled special education student, you would have broke even pretty much every time on those kids, on what it was costing you versus what you were bringing in revenue. So the funding formula, though, has changed. It changed beginning this school year. And so instead of there being a base foundation amount, every school district has basically a base local cost. And then they also have a local capacity number that's derived based on what the state is saying you can, as a community, afford to put towards the effort. So on your current funding reports that come from the state, if I take the base cost that's been calculated for you at $7,248.73, and I subtract out your local capacity amount of $4,574.38, what you're left with is $2,674.35. And what that $2,674.35 is whether the student is open enrolled or moves into Tip City and enrolls in your school in this fiscal year, that's the amount they're saying they're going to pay you. The other part of the formula, however, that makes this calculation a little bit more negative for you is this new funding formula is being phased in. And the phase-in percentage for this school year is 16.67%. So if I multiply that times the 2,674.35, I'm left with $445.81. Now, as I said, this is a phase-in. So what will the phase-in be in future years? Well, next year we know the phase-in percentage to be 33%, which will essentially double what you would bring in this year. Now, what about when is this going to be phased in at 100%? Well, the answer is nobody knows, because in the political wrangling that took place with the passage of this funding formula, one of the concessions that was made by the Speaker of the House to the President of the Senate was they would leave that to the future General Assemblies to decide. So what I guess I'm saying to you is outside of this year and next year, you're not going to be able to say with certainty what open enrollment funding will bring for you. And so you're kind of shooting in the dark, so to speak. The other thing to think about with the way that open enrollment is now funded is you're not being deducted. So back in the day when it was $6,020, that money was deducted from wherever that child lived. So if he came from Bethel local, Bethel got deducted, that money was transferred to Tip City, and that's what you received. Conversely, if a student open enrolled out of Tip City, you were deducted to $6,020. Because the new formula no longer does that, it directly funds these kids from the state, you no longer have a negative open enrollment adjustment. Last year, your negative open enrollment adjustment, in other words, the money for kids that open enrolled out of Tip City, was $294,167.68. This year, that number is zero. So you're almost $300,000 to the good compared to where you were a year ago in terms of your open enrollment adjustment. So if you want to compare that to your historic, so back in fiscal year 20, you had approximately 66 students that open enrolled into Tip City, and you were then adjusted to the positive $398,343.30. You had 35 students open enrolled out, and so you were negatively adjusted to the tune of $210,459.20. Now, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of you were to the good about $187,000. That was fiscal year 20. Currently, you're about $300,000 to the good just because you're not getting deducted for kids leaving. Now, it would be if you took that historic number of, let's say 66, we'll just round it up to 70 kids. Let's just say that you happen to have open enrollment this year and had 70 kids open enrolling into your district. Right now, that's only going to net you about $31,000. And next year, about $62,000. Now, the thing I've not mentioned yet is the categorical funding that would come with these students. So those numbers I just gave you wouldn't include their special ed weighted funding, because unlike before, it is now transferred into you. And the career tech would also continue to follow. You would also get economically disadvantaged aid, and you would also get gifted aid if that student was classified as gifted. But all of those amounts, which we wouldn't know until we applied them to individual kids, would be multiplied by basically 35.87%. So whatever that happens to be, that is your new state share percentage. And all of the weighted or categorical funding would get multiplied by that. So you would never realize even half of that money. But again, in the case of a special education student, you're never going to lose money on them because of the excess cost system. You're always going to be able to bill back the resident district the amount of money you did not receive in revenue in order, and you will break even on those students every time. So I'm not going to, I guess, talk a whole lot more other than to say one thing. I guess in my world as a superintendent, and I think this is pretty common knowledge, this is not something that's new. The concept of being financially positive with accepting open enrollment students has always hinged on the concept of, as long as I don't have to add staff to do so, I'm going to gain money. So in other words, think of it as a airline flight from Cincinnati to Atlanta. If there's 35 empty seats on that flight and it's 3 days before it takes off, if I offer those seats for $25 a piece, I'm going to have more money than I would have if I had not done so. It's not a lot of money, but it's still more than what you had. Now, the other argument that's probably come up over the course of these last couple of years when you've discussed this is the fact that in Tipp City, it cost you approximately $12,000, just a little under $12,000 per student to educate a student. So I know there would be some people thinking, well, if you're only going to give me a small percentage of that, am I financially to the good? Well, the answer goes back to, did you add staff to do it? So with that, I'm going to leave. That's a lot of information, short period of time, but I'm going to leave it to you if you have questions for me.
Anybody have any questions? You should be recognized.
I do.
Mrs. Secor, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Smith. How are
Hello.
you?
Good. How about you?
Okay. The new open enrollment, I'm just trying to make sure I understand some differentiations here. Is the funding for open enrollment, is that tethered to the Fair School Funding Plan? Is that what this is?
Correct.
Okay. And is that also what's referred to as the backpack bill?
Not quite. The backpack bill would be more, as I understand it, a student would get a set amount of money to go wherever he or she chose to attend. So if they decide they want to go to Dayton Chaminade, they take their money and go. So they're, in other words, they would just fund the student wherever they showed up. I don't believe they're talking about deducting school districts. I think they're just talking about funding students wherever they attend. And I think this fair funding plan is kind of one of the incremental steps that has been taken to get to the backpack bill.
So on the Fair School Funding Plan, and this is just so much information. I'm trying to sort of, get to some of the fundamentals. If I understand that correctly, that's only been approved in the state budget for 2 years. Is that correct? That you know of?
That's correct, because every state budget is only 2 years in length. So we're in the first year of the biennium, and next year will be the last of this current biennium. And then what happens beyond that will be determined. Usually they begin the process in January, of which the biennium budget runs out on June 30th. They usually begin the process sometimes in December, but usually January.
So as importantly, I think I'm learning is that the proponents of the Fair School Funding Plan, very hard to get it approved, but unfortunately, because of so many variables, they're not really sure what this is going to look like after a 2-year period. If I understand this correctly, it's not really scientifically worked out how this money is going to continue beyond this kind of 2-year let's delve in and see what this looks like. And that's what I'm understanding is some of the concerns in trying to create this quote, more equitable system. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think your observations are correct because years ago, the preeminent authority on Ohio school funding, Dick Maxwell, always said this is never going to be a mathematical formula. This is always going to be a political formula.
Yes.
Give and take, without getting into specific name and names and all this kind of stuff. There has been, without question, a slow progression in Ohio to getting to the backpack bill. Whether that's the addition of Ed Choice scholarships, it started with the Cleveland voucher system, Ed Choice scholarships, Peterson scholarship, autism scholarships. It's about people taking money and going to wherever it is they want to go. And so if this backpack bill passes, then I think all bets are off because there are, let's put it this way, if the backpack bill were put in place tomorrow, there's $1 billion worth of unfunded non-public students in Ohio right now. So it would cost the state of Ohio $1 billion to do that.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know how that happens without a lot of other things changing. So, and I'm sure you can figure that out too.
So I want to turn over for other people to have a chance, but I guess one thing I want to make that I'm not mixed up, that I'm clearly understanding, is that the old method of open enrollment used to be $6,020 per child. And the new method is not so much based on that student being open enrolled as much as that student having a set amount that goes wherever they came from. The same with our students if they leave. Is that true? It's no longer like an open enrollment figure?
That would be one way to look at it. In other words, what I think you're saying to me is, can I look at it as though when the student, no matter how he ends up in a seat in Tipp City, Ohio, he's funded the same way?
Yes, thank you.
Student lives in your district or open enrolls, the idea that the Cup-Patterson fair funding plan has always tried to get to is fund the student wherever they attend. So let's go back to that number I threw out earlier of little over 35%. So when you used to receive $6,020 for an open enrolled student, you used to get $6,020 times 40% because that was your state share at that time. Now with the recalculation, it's down to 35%. So I don't look for them to ever, I don't believe, depending on how they work this formula, continue to mess with it, you're going to receive somewhere in that 35% of some base cost funding range. And it's always going to be, at least as far as the formula exists today, it's going to be based on what the state calculates your community's local capacity to raise money and contribute to the education of that student to be. So think of it this way, back in the day when you got the money transferred into you from another district, you were getting a little more than the state share. Say their state share percentage back in those days was 50%. So they would have received $3,010 for that kid, and they would have been deducted $6,020 and given to you. The same thing happened to you. I mean, you were funded at 40%, but they took the money away from you at 100%. So that's where this $294,000, that's no longer being taken from you. That was your biggest gain in this fair funding formula in terms of open enrollment, was you no longer have that expense.
So our state funding at 35%, our local is at 65%. So our local obligation, if you will, to support our students is actually increasing a little, I believe.
Correct.
Okay. Which is hefty because I think the average is around a 50%. I mean, that's sort of, so we considered that wealthier district, whatever. So therefore we have, it sounds like we're kind of edging up to more support locally from like a 60, 62, now we're up to about a 65. And then, okay, I've asked a lot of questions. I want, let's have a
Well,
chance.
let me make one more comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Sure. Another comment I'll make, and this is something about the longevity of keeping track of certain things. I've never really, let's say, kept track of it in terms of Miami County, but in Mercer County, I can tell you that there's a district there that used to have a state share of over 70%, and it's barely 30 now. So from the time these things, I'm not going to name the governor, but this got reworked and it has consistently declined. And my question has always been, has the aggregate amount of money that the state provides for education to local school districts declined? In other words, I saw our districts declining and declining rapidly. What I didn't know was if there were other districts that their state share percentage was increasing. I've never had anybody say, boy, my state share is really going up. I'm loving this. Never heard that said. So I suspect that is part of the way this funding formula has nipped away at state support over the last, I'm going to say 6 to 8 years.
Okay, thank you very, I could spend another couple hours, but that's me. But thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to ask Mr. Smith any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Smith, my name is Teresa Dunaway. So my question is, as you mentioned, the open enrolled local dollars are 6,020, but you also mentioned it's $12,000 in our district to educate a student. That changes district by district. There's 100 different variables in that. So when you do mention the $12,000, do you include what it costs local taxpayers for the students who do College Credit Plus? Or is it the $12,000 for all students, and then the College Credit Plus would be above and beyond the $12,000?
I don't know if that's calculated. In other words, I think it is if they here's the reason I don't know. When the state captures how much it costs you to educate a student, they categorize it. So whether it's administrative cost per pupil, instructional cost per pupil, operations support per pupil, pupil support, those are the categories. And how they get to that number is the coding of funds in EMIS. So I don't know if the coding of a College Credit Plus expenditure makes it into instructional cost per pupil or not. But if you're teaching, I mean, obviously you have some, if you have College Credit Plus classes on your campus taught by your teacher, that part of it's in there, but exactly the amount that's going to, let's say, Sinclair, Wright State, whoever, I don't know if that's in that instructional cost or not, because I don't know how that coding sequence will work.
Right. And then the other example, well, one thing I like that you said is it's never been a mathematical conversation. It's always been a political conversation. And I think everybody can somewhat agree with that. It's heated in all districts, whether you're for, against, neutral, it's always a heated conversation. But one example that is always used is the airplane example. And I am not a fan of that example, because in that example, you're assuming that every student comes to school and leaves. So your student A drives themselves to school every day and goes home. Student B takes the bus to school, has 504 services, plays 3 sports, and there's all these other variables. So the airplane example, I know people love to use that example, but I would have to argue, I don't see how that's true, because every student is different and unique. And one example would be College Credit Plus. Student A, in my first example, who drives themselves to school, no additional school services, goes home, no College Credit Plus. And then student B, bus, sports, 504, College Credit Plus. I think it's really hard to say that the seats are all the same. You're filling seats on I don't think that's an equitable example.
I'm not disagreeing with your concept at all. All I'm saying is anytime there's an empty seat and you charge for it, you gain money. I'm not saying that you gain proportionally or it's fair or it works out.
Okay,
You're absolutely correct that all these kids have different sets, and it's like, so when people ask me for an example, your open enrollment policies, and maybe your old one had it. You had, I can remember mine. We didn't allow more than like 20 kids in a primary classroom. So if you wanted to open enroll in and there were 20 kids in all of our third grade classrooms, you couldn't get in. And part of that would be I'm going to go back to my Toledo Public days. Those kids had higher threshold of needs. That was limited at 18 kids in Toledo Public for good reason, because there was a recognition those kids had higher needs. So that's an educational assessment you have to make with respect to open enrollment. Are the needs of my kids that live in this community going to be met if I fill an empty seat because my resident students have high needs and they're going to, without question, the teacher in that classroom is going to be spread more thin. And is that going to be detrimental educationally to the whole process? And so that's a non-financial issue that has to be considered because it's the primary issue of why we're all here.
Any other questions, Mrs. Dunaway?
no, thank you, I appreciate it.
Mrs. Strom, Mr. Mays, do you have any questions? No.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I just, I think what we were talking about with the cost per student, 12,000 and the $6,000 roughly number, that was under the old open enrollment financing arm, correct? Not the
That
new.
is correct, because now it's down to, right, if you were to have it this year, would have been $445.
And when you indicated earlier that if you're not adding staff, you're not going to lose money on open enrollment, even though that you may have services that differ from different students in open enroll compared to those of the district. If you're receiving 6,000 roughly per student and you're not adding any additional teachers or staff, you're likely going to have a financial benefit from having those open enroll students. Is that correct?
Correct. And that, and again, going back to the old formula, it worked that way for you because let's put it this way, under the old formula, whether you took the kids in or not, you had kids leaving you by open enrollment, you got deducted. In today's world, that is not true anymore. So to not have open enrollment coming in, you're not going to lose because you're not getting deducted for the kids that left you. Under the old formula, you were almost fighting fire with fire because you knew you were going to get deducted. Now, can I flip that to a positive equation by, bringing kids in here to offset that? That's not a concern anymore.
So now, I guess some clarification on the new funding. You were going through the numbers a little fast, but you said $7,000 and that's something, I can't remember the number. What was it?
Okay, the base cost is, okay, so under this new fair funding formula, they determine a base cost for your community or for your school district at $7,248.73.
And then, so what does that base cost mean? Does that mean that we're going to get that per student?
Okay, let me kind of punt a little bit here.
Because
Every year, or not every year, every 2 years when the state passes a biennium budget, the department is obviously charged with making sure the money comes to you that under law that you're entitled to. And every time they write a line by line funding explanation on how they reach the amounts that are there. This has been so complicated that here we are in March of the first year of the biennium, and that document has yet to be completed. So I'm handicapped to answer your question. However, I can say to you, something that just showed up on the department's website, I think in the last couple of days, is the base funding calculation for every district. So you can go in there and pull that up. So that was not, I don't remember seeing that a week ago.
And that base funding theoretically will represent kind of our per student funding.
Correct, because what they tried to capture is how much does it cost to educate a kid in your school district? And you'll see in that base funding calculation, there's going to be your data being used to drive that. How much, what's like the cost of your staff, not the cost of any other district staff.
Can I ask one quick follow-up question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Smith, with what you just said, that each district's base cost calculation is out there. Not trying to be sarcastic here. Is it more than just the numbers? I mean, do they actually tell you what the numbers are that are in the formula?
That's why I think we're still waiting on that line by line funding explanation, but I think there is an explanation. See, I ran across this earlier today that this is now out there. So I haven't really looked at it in depth to say, are they explaining how these numbers appeared? Now, my sense of it is this. Every position that you hire has a position code in EMIS. Based on that is where they're pulling the information to calculate your base cost. So remember when I said those categories of what it costs per pupil, that's based on how you were coding things into EMIS. So whoever got classified as an administrative lieutenant, principal, whoever, those position codes would have fed into the administrative cost per pupil calculation.
And then on the open enrolled, then you provided two different figures. The next after this, the 7,248.73 cents was 4,500. I missed the rest of that.
Okay, good question. They are calculating that the $4,574.38 is your local capacity. In other words, your ability to pay that base cost. They believe that Tipp City District is able to pay that amount towards the 72.48.73. And so when you subtract those two, that's where you're left with the 2,674.35. And that would be what was coming from the state. However, they're phasing it in. So they're phasing that number in at 16.67%. So if I multiply the 16.67% times the 2674.35, that's where I came up with the $445.81.
Yeah, so, and that's for, now that's not just, is that just for the 2,674.35 is what's left? And that's only funded at 16.7%. And you indicated whether open enroll or someone that moves into the district, does that apply to our existing? I guess I'm a little confused on how this new funding applies to our students with the state, what we're going to get from the state. So is this,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is where I'm a little bit, I'm not sure if there's any kind of guarantee coming into play here. So usually when the state implement, in the course of my career, new funding formulas have come and gone. And typically what's happened is they hold you harmless if you get less than what you would have received a year ago. So going back to that number, the intent is when it's fully funded that you would get that $2,600.74. Right now you're getting the $445 based on the formula. Whether or not there's a guarantee that's giving you more money above that is something I can't really answer right now. But so I guess going back to the first question about It's not really scientific at this point because nobody knows the outcome when before it's implemented. Yeah, they run projections, but they don't really know, and they run across all kinds of things that maybe they forgot. That's what's going to happen with this thing. It would not surprise me to see open enrollment revert back to the way it was funded before. I'm not saying it will happen, but it would sure wouldn't surprise me.
And so when you said this is a political formula, not a mathematical formula, meaning that there isn't a mathematical formula in the law that says this is how you're going to be funded. They just kind of loosely talk about it, and then you're running on a 2-year budget with some information revealed here and there.
Right. Well, one of the key concepts of the attempt at the Fair School Funding Plan was to get off of guarantees. The idea was if the schools are funded the way they should be, there shouldn't need to be a guarantee if they're adequately funded. So that, again, yeah, there's a mathematical formula in terms of how you're getting paid right now, but how that formula came to be was political. So the uniqueness of this past biennium was this. The same party controlled the Senate and the House, which has been true for a long time in Ohio. The difference was the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate didn't see eye to eye on how schools should be funded. That's why you have this partial phase in and nothing beyond that in writing. So in order for the Speaker of the House to get his fair funding formula at least partially adopted, he had to concede to that part because that's what the Senate President wanted.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, I have no more.
Okay. My question is, I got a little lost where you were talking about the base local cost, 7248. And I see the local capacity, so we're responsible for 63%. But where I got lost was earlier you said our student cost was 12,000. So what's the difference between the base cost and that 12,000? Maybe it's
Okay.
I didn't catch
Perfect question, because, and this has been true in Ohio ever since I've been a part of this whole thing. People used to call it, phantom revenue and all kinds of things. The state has always budgeted for education in a residual manner. It was not tied to the actual cost to educate the child. Now, back when Governor Strickland was in power, that's what he wanted. He called it the evidence-based model. We had it for a while, but it was never fully funded, because to fully fund education based on what it actually is costing you to educate that student, state doesn't have the money for that. So they've always, these other numbers, how they're derived, and there were, when Governor Kasich took office, the first person he had calculate all this, he ended up getting rid of her because it didn't come out the way he wanted to. So what I'm saying to you is exactly what the difference is, why there's a gap of $5,000-6,000 in your base cost and what it actually costs you. That's, again, it's tied up in the formula. And right now, I can't explain it because I haven't seen that line by line explanation yet. I used to be able to explain it pretty well, because back in the day, the difference was always based on 23 mills of property tax, what that raised in your district. And that was your local charge off, if you will. That was your local responsibility. And the state had the remainder, but not the remainder of what it cost you to educate a kid. It was the remainder of what they said they would pay to educate a kid. I know that's confusing as can be, but those two numbers, I don't know how to reconcile $11,000, almost $12,000 versus the $7,200.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead, Mrs. Sikora.
Mr. Smith, if we had, okay, for example, we have, like, let's say, make the math easy, 50 kids leaving our district, they're going to a parochial school or charter school, whatever. they're resident students, but they're going somewhere else. So that money that is attached to them is, how much will that be, and how is that different from the past? I guess I'm really still not understanding this.
And let me start within the past.
Okay,
When you had a child leave Tipp City Schools to enroll in a charter school in the past, you were deducted the $6,020, just like if it had been a kid open enrolling out to some other district. And that money would have been transferred from you to the charter school. If the child went to, let's say, a parochial school, no money was taken from you. The kid just went to the parochial school, and that was the end of it. If he got the Ed Choice Scholarship, or they were a John Peterson Scholarship provider or autism scholarship provider, they got that money, but that wasn't, let's put it this way, you would have been deducted if he had an autism or Peterson scholarship or an Ed Choice scholarship. But if he just, without one of those 3 scholarships, you would have lost nothing. Now, in the current state, all those scholarships are paid directly from the state now. So I didn't look at that part of it because this was open enrollment, but if you had scholarship money deducted from you in the past and sent to a non-public school because they were a provider, that's not being deducted from you anymore either.
so a student who is a resident student who enrolls in a charter school, we'll put a parochial aside for now. In a charter school, I'm sorry, say that again, please. We don't lose?
No, you're not being deducted for that student this year. You were last year, but not this year.
The
Okay.
next 2 years.
Right.
The next two. Okay, so if you have 1,000 kids leave, you're still getting,
No big deal.
wow, how is that fair?
Well, you're not getting the money. They're just not there.
It's not getting,
They're just,
it's not getting okay.
It's a 2-year experiment.
Yes,
Yeah.
and secondly, perhaps the most important question in all of this, in my opinion, is why do we allow this chaotic funding system in Ohio? And why do we make it so complex and difficult when other states do not?
Exactly. It's all right.
it's a great question. And I just go back to one of the things that years ago, I was a candidate for the superintendent's job in Defiance. And they hired a gentleman out of Illinois to do this job. And they specifically asked him in the interview process, what is your experience in running school levies? Because we're going to need to do so. And he said, well, I've run levies every single year. I've been a superintendent in Illinois. But the communication never got to the point where in Illinois, as he described it to me, they present their budget to the county auditor, and the county auditor determines whether or not they get all that money or not. That was the concept of running a levy in Illinois.
Oh, wow.
I mean, clearly different than Ohio.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, Ohio is really difficult to navigate when it comes to school funding. I hope I didn't confuse you more than I helped you.
Oh, not at all.
I think your clarifying was helpful. So then the 16%, 16.7% application on, after subtracting our local capacity, is what we're going to receive theoretically.
Right, and that goes up to 33% last year, and I'll do this. I'll say, I had a conversation with the director of Ohio School Finance to answer those 2 questions you just asked. I wanted to know exactly what you would receive if you took a kid in this year and next year. Those were the answers I received from him. So while I'm unclear on other things you've asked me, because I haven't seen the line-by-line budget explanation yet, that's why I asked that question to him, because I wanted to make sure it's right.
Go ahead, Mr. Swan.
So You said it, I think, at the beginning of your presentation. I just want to make sure we clarify it for the board. That actual amount, whether it ever gets fully funded at the 2674, or as we go from 16 to 33 to whatever the next year's percentage is, that amount is for any student in Tipp City, regardless of the reason that he or she is here.
Correct.
Open enrollment, resident, that doesn't matter. That's the amount per student.
Correct. And I'll throw in another group of kids. You probably have some kids that are court placed into your district into foster care, whatever it is. So that that's what you're receiving. Now, before I leave you empty on that, when you receive a court placed kid into your district, yeah, you're getting that little bit of state share, that 20, I'm going to just talk in terms it's fully funded, that 2674, you're getting that. What happens with that other $44,000? Where did that comes to you in tuition from the resident district? So the concept of tuition is this: there is a parent in another school district paying taxes, and the child is being educated in your district. So it's only fair that that local money that is raised in that other district is transferred into you to make you whole. And of course, as we talked earlier, that gets you to the 7,000 number, doesn't get you to that 11,000 number. That is your actual expenses. And it's not going to come out exactly that way because you don't know what the tuition rate is in that other district. The department calculates those every year.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I don't think, if you have nothing else, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Smith. Appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome and good luck. I know you got hard decisions to take care of, whether it's this and other things. So I don't envy the process anymore. So hope you all have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Clear as mud.
All right. So our next item on the work session.
Well,
Okay, do we want to
well,
discuss this further or?
what month is the board going to vote on this? Or is it April, May? When do we open kindergarten registration?
I think it's March. I think it's March. Typically, the board has voted in
Okay,
the past.
I thought it was March or April. Okay.
Yeah. So if you wanted to, we could have a piece of the March work session to further process and then finalize the vote at the March regular meeting. Wait a minute.
We are.
Whoa, we've got out of February. We're in March already.
I was like, wait a minute.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
This is the March work session.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Typically, this is
No,
a bigger
I feel like
conversation.
it's just because we just had a meeting, so I think it's
Yeah.
confusing.
So if we vote on this,
Overnight thunderstorm.
Yeah.
so we'll be voting on this in 2 weeks, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because of kindergarten registration,
Right.
it pretty much has to be March or April, correct?
Yes, kindergarten registration is just about tax day, I believe, is when that's gonna open. So if it's not
So
the
it has to be
regular meeting
March.
in March, it would be the work session in April.
Oh, yeah, I was trying to pull up the date for the April.
Well, you want your window, you gotta have enough window time if you're gonna have it.
April.
To keep the kids. Yeah.
My thought is it was to vote on it at the next regular board meeting.
Well, my thought is that we need a lot more understanding. Something that just sets me through the roof is when people endorse or vote something, they don't really know what they're signing it for. That is just bad in so many regards. And I feel like we just don't have enough understanding. It'd be nice to sort of have like a Venn to see some diagrams here of what's similar, dissimilar, what's changed. Do you understand all of this, Mrs. Fox? Just curious. I mean, you know what I'm trying to ask.
I do think I understand it.
What's,
I think the part that is maybe complex too, or just the procedures of implementing the open enrollment out to the public, so they understand. Or those that have children, that they know our procedures, because year to year, there's a procedure and a plan, how he would bring kids in, who they are. You know, they get to their senior year and we would be full, who would stay, who wouldn't stay. There's big decisions made at that point when we have too much open enrollment interest, not enough space. But there again, if you have empty classrooms, you have a classroom with 10 kids, would it have been some, beneficial to the district to have had, hey, we could have had 10 more third graders in that room, or there could have been movement with staff to cover kids, So there's just so different ways to look at it,
So a very logical question in my mind would be, since we may be voting on this in 2 weeks, what data is there in terms of formulating, if the vote would be majority for open enrollment, there's 2 questions: is that adjacent districts or all districts? And either option, then the next logical question becomes, based on what data do we have when we fulfill our statutory obligation to have a policy in place in order to engage in open enrollment, which I don't feel that we've really done a good job in the past. I think we just sort of ignored that part of the statute. So you have to have a policy in place that identifies your buildings, your grade level capacities, your program capacities. And I have seen nothing on that. I have heard discussions of it. We are March, April, May, we're two months away from dismissal. And so we should have a fairly stable set of numbers, I would think, to look at on that. And then being on policy committee, and we all took that oath to uphold things, that open enrollment statute, I don't think is getting a lot of attention. These are all numbers tonight talking about that, but there are obligations a district has to meet. And the ODE, anybody can request a complaint by the ODE to investigate our open enrollment. And it's my understanding, having looked through some of that information, and they should technically fulfill that. So the statute policy is that you have to have a policy in place as a district to engage in open enrollment. Makes complete sense.
Definitely, I would think that we would.
We have an open.
Definitely do.
enrollment
We have an
policy,
enrollment
guys.
policy.
Yeah.
We just have to decide whether we're gonna open
No,
it
Mr.
up.
Patrick, with all due respect, and I still have the floor. No, we don't have an open enrollment policy in place. Because to have an open enrollment policy in place, you have to lay out the framework of what your classes are. Okay, establish capacity. What's the determined, and look in our policy right now, or the data that would be skewed into that policy school year by school year, because I understand it would be variable. But for example, what is the capacity of a 3rd grade math class? What has been determined? Our curriculum people. What have we determined that after you hit this number, you have a diminishing return of learning? What is that number, please? Have we determined that?
I don't know if we would determine it through curricular pieces, but the historic number that has been presented to me was maximum 25 per class. And in grade levels, before you get to secondary, there would be 8 classes. So the magic number for each grade level was 200.
Okay, so what's the magic number for Algebra 1 at the middle school?
Oh, we've had this conversation for 6 years.
You see, it is not, I don't know why the sign, because we are here to champion for Tipp City kids first and foremost. And it makes sense. I know the government gets beat up a lot on a lot of different things, but sometimes, I mean, there is a well thought out understanding behind this. You can't open up open enrollment and start crunching numbers to make money at the expense of your own children. And I think it makes total sense. That's why you survey your domain, you establish what's fair to the students, to the teachers, et cetera, grade level, subject matter, program. And you do so that the children that have the right to be here by statute are not being sacrificed in their education to crunch numbers, if you will, to make money. In other words, it's not an investing tool, it's an opportunity tool. And so I'm saying I haven't seen those. I do not know what the capacity is, our program, or what our capacity of our special education program. What are our building capacities? And now we have a discussion about new facilities, but I don't even know what our capacity is at our existing buildings. That needs to be in place. It is our obligation under the open enrollment statute to have that established, identified, because people, how can you decide how many more kids you're going to allow in? How do you determine, oh, our third grade is full. Oh, our sixth grade is open. Oh, our seventh grade is full. How do you come to those type of decisions without your data?
Yeah, I thought we did have a fixed, didn't you mention in the meeting the other day, number of students?
We have a recommendation.
Secondary,
The
primary,
state, I don't know,
and the union too, don't they even have a piece in that?
they don't have a class size.
The number, I was just curious. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
The state recommendation is 1 to 25 per Ohio state law, district-wide. District-wide, that's the only state parameter. It's 1 to 25, one teacher per 25 students, district-wide. So taking our total enrollment divided by our total staff, it wouldn't be no more than 25 to fulfill the state requirement. Everything else is locally determined.
Well, I would also like to remind this district that I think it was last week or the week before, we voted on adding a counselor at the middle school for the rest of this school year. Because our existing counselor at the middle school was overwhelmed.
Correct. First time ever in the history of the school too.
Although the school used to have to.
And we
Yeah.
don't have,
There was,
we don't have open enrollment in place right now. So what I'm saying is, there again, I feel that if we're going to have a vote in 2 weeks, it's not a good thing. I think that it's going to be very rushed and sloppy voting, quite honestly, because we haven't taken the time to really look and discuss this. Is there any way we can vote on this in like the beginning, maybe the April work session?
thank you for your comments, Mrs. Zakor.
You're welcome.
All right, anyone else have anything on open enrollment? Mrs. Dunaway, go ahead.
I had a question. I asked this last fall, but it was too early because we do have kids moving to the district and there's a little bit of, I'll just say jockeying that kind of goes on maybe the first 6 or 8 weeks of school. But one document that I ask for every single year, I know people get sick of it, but we have 2 new board members. It would be nice. The math is really simple, K through 5, when you have pods, right? 200 kids, 25, 200 divided by 25, you need 8 teachers. My whole issue from day one, 7 years now, is 6th grade and up. Because when kids start changing classes, and I always use algebra as an example, 31, 32 kids in algebra is not effective. If we don't want over 25 kids in the 3rd grade class, it's completely unacceptable for this district to put 32 kids in algebra. That's always been my big thing. That's my hot button. We are not doing the students or the staff, we're doing them a disservice, and the parents. And the proof is in the pudding, because we've had to add math teachers at the high school because we have too many kids in math classes at the middle school. So one thing I would like is, grades 6 through 12. How many kids are in these classes? If we could just have the schedule breakdown, I want to know. Are there 30 kids in science, 30 kids in math? And, My example is always that one year in algebra, we had 32 kids in algebra period 1. And at the end of the day, it was 8 or 10 kids in the final algebra period. So you have 32 and 10. So which kids do you think ended up doing better at the end of the year on not just the state exam, but going into the next level of math the following year? Probably the kids who only had 10 in their grade. 31 or 32 was too many kids. If you get one kid asking questions, the poor teacher can't even teach the curriculum because this one kid, it's a lot. And if you have 32 kids nonstop, I'm not a teacher, but it's kind of hard to teach the material when there's that many kids. So that would be my request.
I'd like to say something.
So,
While I understand exactly what you're asking for, you have to also understand with education that everything ebbs and flows. And so you can't from one year have that exact data to know exactly how many kids are going to be in each class each year because it's going to change. Every kid is so different. You can't get an exact number from year to year. So you just have to kind of go with your gut sometimes. I don't know how else to describe it, but like, do you know what I'm saying? Like you can't get an exact number.
Not really.
I would disagree with that because, okay, for instance, I'll just use the middle school. If we have 50 kids in
hold on
the
one
advanced
second.
math track.
Hold on 1 second, Ms. Stone. Mrs. Drum just had the floor. Are you done?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would love to hear what her
Okay.
thought is unless you're moving on to something else.
That's fine. Mr. Mays has not had an opportunity.
Oh, yes,
Everybody
sorry.
is, I'm trying to do, everybody gets a chance and we can come back if that's all right. Did you have something you want to say?
Well, I just roughly looked in here to see if we had a policy. I thought I had seen something. And there's a policy 5113, which I'd like to actually delve into since this is new to me.
Right. And then, and we'll go back to the question but I just want to say that we do have a policy of 5113. I did just review the Ohio Administrative Code that Mrs. Zakor is referencing. I do believe that our policy addresses it in that it indicates the superintendent is going to provide guidelines for the implementation of the policy that includes setting district capacity limits by grade level, school building, and educational programs. And so I think that we have a policy in place. Superintendent shall prepare the guidelines. And so if we do proceed, we do have that policy in place that is compliant with the statute. And if Mr. Stefani prepared the guidelines, that would then satisfy everything that we need. I think that I would, as far as when to bring this up again, I would defer to the board as a whole, obviously, but I think it'd be helpful for the administrative staff to let us know what their time thoughts are as far as whether we do it this month or the first meeting in April, or whether we have a special meeting for the purposes of discussing the open enrollment issues. It would make sense to me that if we all requested the information that we think we need from the administrative staff, and then are able to discuss at the next meeting, that makes sense. If we need to have a special meeting because of timing issues, then that's fine too. Or we could do it at the work session that comes with April if the administrative staff think that makes sense. And then I think that that's something that we can answer ultimately at our regular meeting. But those are my thoughts. I from an open district or open enrollment standpoint, things that would be helpful for me that I'll be requesting is kind of where we are with class sizes, the projections, and whether we are looking at adding staff. I'd like to understand better the high school class sizes related to math and things like that. I know it's been said that that's an issue. The financial incentive for open enrollment does not appear to be anywhere close to what it was prior to. We were receiving $398,000, for open enrollment before. Now, we'd be lucky to get anything like very low thousands. And so I think that for me, it was always a financial issue. So I think that we'll see where we end up, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. So All right. Jen, go ahead. Well, actually,
No, it's
this
trying to
is-
respond.
Yeah.
Mrs. Dunaway, go ahead.
So I just, I'll use an example. This current year's graduating class, there is an unprecedented amount of gifted, just super super learners, yeah. So I'll just use 50 as an example.
Okay.
So when those kids started sixth grade, there's in Tipp City, because we are blessed, we have a lot of intelligent, parents, and that trickles down to the kids, wonderful teachers, build that foundation. It all goes together. It's, it's one big team.
Yeah.
So I'll just say 50. So in sixth grade, 50 kids in the current graduating class, they all took this like fast math track.
Okay.
So in our district is kind of unique that we offer that. So it almost is 50. So in my example, in that year, we had 32 kids in one period and 10. So that's 42, not quite 50, but even that. So it's a scheduling thing too, right? So if we're seeing that, let's work on the schedule. Like, how can we take the burden off the teacher, help the students? But we do know how many kids. Ebbs and flows, yes. You might have some kids say, you know what? I can't keep up this pace. I'm going to drop out of the fast track. Or you might have new kids move into the district, but we do have a general sense, because once you get into that fast track on which then parlays into being in the AP classes at the high school, it's a pretty solid number. You might lose a couple, but it's the same. It starts in sixth grade. And that's when the scheduling with the kids, too many in one class, that's when the periods kind of really get, I'll just say, out of whack.
Yeah, I understand all of that. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to.
So I'm just going to try to give you, I'll come back to you, Mrs. Corber. You've talked a few times. So I just want to make sure that everybody gets the same amount, and then we'll sort of get alternating views here. Mrs. Sherman, do you have anything to say in response to that?
No, I understand what she's saying. I think we just had a difference of what we were looking at. Does that make sense?
Mr. Mays, did you have anything?
Just one more thing, and Teresa kind of brought it up there, the burden on the teachers. I'd like to kind of hear what the teachers have to say. They're the ones that have the burden. That's it.
Mr. Stefanik, you raise your hand.
Just trying to give some background information. It was the March meeting last year when the board did make the decision. And we do have a template administrative guideline for open enrollment, but it was dated 2009. So it's definitely something that we would have to dive into and make sure that it was updated. Did not dive into that because we haven't had open enrollment since I came here. So it wasn't anything that we had to review for application. But since there were the beginnings of an administrative guideline, we could go in there and revise it probably in a pretty quick fashion.
Mrs. Secor?
Okay, a couple things, several things actually. A comment made by a board member that you just sort of have to go with your gut or whatever is in contravention to what public education is, which is about data driven, drive by data. The policy, yes, we do have a policy that addresses open enrollment, 5113. It is a policy, however, it's the implementation of the aspects of that policy. For example, so to say that, oh, we have a policy, no, that's not what I'm referring to. Of course, we have a policy. The question is, how are we implementing and honoring that policy in all aspects of it? You will notice under G in that policy, maintaining appropriate racial balance. Well, this also just happens to fall into a bigger category as well. That you have to set district capacity limits by grade level, school building, and educational program. I appreciate the blunt formula 1 per 25. However, we all know that that is just a blunt number. It's like an acuity of a patient. You can have 5 patients that are extremely intensive care requirements versus 5 patients that are hours away from being discharged. It is not an apples to apples formula. To throw a number out there and say, oh, well, it's this number, that is kind of embarrassing. Secondly, I want to say is that who has set the district capacity limits by grade level, school building, and educational program? To Mr. Main's point, who are involved in making those decisions and determinations and having that input into what that capacity level is. I haven't seen anything on it. I've received no data on this, the 2 years I've been here. So how can we say that the policy is being, all factors implemented? The second area that I'm going to say, again, our obligation to uphold the law, and I'm kind of touchy about this because of some situations over in a courthouse right now, challenging my holding up the law when I've been very dedicated to trying to do this. For example, application, if you look at in this policy 5113, case in point here, number A, non-discrimination for open enrollment children based on grade level, including preschool disability, academic ability. You can check our forms because I have them, the open enrollment forms, 2 years in a row, 2 different school years, where we asked the open enrollment families what their academic ability, what's their grades, their GPA. Had no business being on that form. We're not supposed to ask English language proficiency. We had on our form, you check, is it Spanish, Japanese, English? No, sorry, that's not the deal with open enrollment. If you accept that child, you do it unbiased and you take what you get and you accommodate it. Then we had on our open enrollment form their extracurricular and their athletic ability. We even asked under the, Ohio, what's that acronym for the Ohio School?
OHSAA.
OHS. We even asked, did you play? And then we had what sport? That one really, like, wow, if this isn't a recruitment looking instrument. Oh, soccer, okay, basketball, oh, tennis, No, sorry, we're not supposed to reference these features of an open enrollment student to be totally objective, unbiased, and honoring the law. So yes, this is part of our policy in 5113, but it doesn't mean that we have in actuality implemented and honored that policy in all aspects. So that's why I say this is a bigger discussion. Oh, and here's another thing. We talk about cost driven. I don't know that open enrollment is a cost. I've always said this, it's not a monetized argument. It shouldn't be. For example, transportation. Oh, that's F. I see it right here. Okay. So in transportation, the open enrolled student, by the way, has the ability to be dropped off at any of our designated bus stops and has the right to jump on our school bus from a designated bus stop and go to whatever building they need to go to. Now, the school doesn't have an obligation to drive to somewhere other than our designated bus stops. But the point is, our open enrolled students, if we have them, can be dropped off at our bus stops and we must accommodate. The second thing is, if the family that's open enrolled meets the poverty line, that family can submit a request for reimbursement for their transportation all the way from their home to their building. And then, of course, if the student is special education and it's factored into their IEP, whatever, then, the district has the obligation to accommodate that. So there's a lot of things. I just bring up also the fact that we just hired a retired counselor to come back and finish out this school year. We don't have open enrollment, but we needed to add staff to accommodate. And what's driving that? I don't know, COVID, whatever, but the point is, who said that this is not, this shouldn't be, should not be a monetized issue because so many things break out and happen. COVID, whether it's the war in the Ukraine now, things that trigger unexpected events that require it to be addressed. So I think we need more time and discussion on the numbers alone. I went through some non-monetized issues. I think we need a better discussion even on the monetary side before voting.
Mr. Mays, I see you have anything. Mrs. Dunaway, did you have anything else to follow up? All right, Mrs. Drummond, do you have anything to follow up? Mr. Mays, go ahead.
The only thing that, I want to make, or I want to understand here is we didn't write this policy. This came from Neola, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Don't they revise those things every so often? And so this looks to me like it was Neola 2006 copyright. So I'm surprised that, there have been no revisions, since that time. So it's not.
2009, Rick, it was revised.
Yeah, 2009, but it's still a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's because the law.
Yeah,
didn't
I'm
change
just
that much.
saying that we didn't write this.
And it's possible that the administrative guideline template actually came from Neola as well. But you can go in and you can customize it to your own district.
But you'll see it's linked to
Hold on
the
1 second.
legal.
You don't have.
Okay, so
You
I
don't-
want to respond to that though.
Is that all you had, Rick?
That's it.
Right, Mr. Stefanik,
No, I'd like to respond to that, please.
when I recognize you, you will. You
I'd
just-
like to be recognized so I can respond. to
I'm
that.
going next. I've been going in order here. I'll get back to you. I've got you noted. Mr. Stefanik, something, we've heard that a counselor was added to the school here several times. Were we short a counselor? What's the history behind that?
It was presented to me that sometime in the past, there were 2 counselors at the middle school level. And then it was reduced to 1 counselor. I don't, right now in the notes in front of me, I don't have the actual date when that happened. But it was several years back
Okay,
when there were 2 counselors.
thank you.
It wasn't recent.
Okay, but to balance that out, I'd like to take the floor now, please.
Hold on. Go ahead, Mrs. Sikora.
To balance that out, you say that in the past there were 2 counselors. Yeah, we had 2 full-time psychologists there. So we had 2 full-time speech language pathologists here. So you can't just like dangle this out there and then not balance it out with, it seems like the district at somewhere before I started, starts shifting to contracting services. Or whether it's school psychologist, speech language pathology with ESC. So rather than in-house, seems like the trend started to farm it out. So I'm not quite sure what the point is. Okay, well, we had 2 and now we're down to 1. Also back then, we weren't hiring a counseling service.
True.
So there's a lot of variables that just, you got to balance out the whole discussion here. As far as Mr. Maines, if you look at policy 51.3, I'm not quite sure I understand, Rick, your point that it was sort of driven by Neola. Of course, yes, driven by Neola. And it's also attached to the Ohio statute of open enrollment.
Yes, I saw that.
So it has to be done with legal parameters
Right.
and fulfillment. And so that's what I wanted to say on that one.
Mrs. Dunaway, I think you already done. I'm sorry.
So yes, the open enrollment wasn't, the overall broad policy looks like it was last revised on 2009. Maybe the statute hasn't changed from then. But again, we do have a policy. Yes, we've had this in place since 2002. The smarter discussion is, are we implementing? Are we honoring the policy? That's what I say, all parameters of it.
Mrs. Dunaway, you had your hand raised.
Well, I don't think, other than Mrs. Junker, I don't see anybody in this room that can answer this question because we're all kind of newish. So I've been here 7 years. There's never been 2 middle school guidance counselors in the 7 years I've been on the school board. Was it 15 years ago, 20? I'm just curious.
Check with the historic people in the central office.
Well, I mean, Mrs. Junker is sitting right here.
I can answer that
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
It was a financial
When was
issue that was the reason why we dropped that counselor. Had nothing to do with student numbers. It had nothing to do with anything, but at the time, there were financial issues going on in the district. And
How long?
from my perspective, once you lose a position, it's very, very difficult to bring it back. That's my personal opinion on that, but
10, 15 counselors at the middle school?
maybe-
She's trying to talk to us. Let her
there
talk.
there was 2 counselors at the middle school. I cannot tell you how long, but it's been maybe 10.
Okay,
But again, we have been, I know for sure, we have been asking and wanting one for years and years and years to help support that. It has nothing to do with per se student numbers as much as the workload that has been put on one person for that length of time.
correct, because in the past, we've always had a, what do you call it, co-op? We've been lucky. Of course, you don't get lucky all the time, but one thing that has kind of worked is at least getting a co-op in there. I don't know what work they do and FERPA and all this, but okay, so we're saying 10 years. Financial decision 10 years ago, we're just guessing.
Yeah, I'm
We're
totally
ballparking,
guessing on
okay.
that. Yes, exactly. But
Yeah.
our guidance counselors are now school counselors and their duties have changed dramatically.
Right.
And that is why the need has been, we've had that need, not per se specific student numbers. That makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, 10 years. We'll just,
Well, there's another one of those dynamics that's not always driven
Hold
by.
on, Mrs. Zakor, hold
It's
on.
just a comment, it's just a.
No, I know, but you've had a
follow-up.
lot of comments. We gotta follow some order here. Mrs. Dunaway, did you have anything else?
no, I think I've lived here 9 years, 7 years on the board, so 10 years is probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. And I apologize if I'm not that as
Oh.
specific on that.
We're just guessing.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes.
Ma-
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman.
Are you done, Mrs. Dunaway?
Yeah.
Mrs. Drum, did you have anything else?
Good.
Mr. Mays, did you have anything else? I think we've discussed this at length. Mrs. Zakor, did you want to make a last comment?
Yeah, I just feel that in order to vote on this at the end of this month, I think it was a bit rushed without really having some more clarity on things specifically. You know, I'm really, I think, well versed on the non-monetary issues that are, I'm not totally clear on what these new numbers are for open enrollment.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Stefan.
I haven't found a deadline from the state, but there are some in the administrative guideline. There were things that said we're not accepting any applications until April the 1st. But that doesn't mean that that's a set deadline. So if the board wished to go to, an April work session to provide more time to get information or to have some more presentations, I don't think there's anything prohibiting that. But last year you did make it at the March meeting, so that's. And I made a mistake. I was a month off on kindergarten registration. It seems my calendar just didn't flip the pages. March got here too fast. It's this month, by the 15th, that kindergarten registration starts.
Holy cow.
So it's, and that doesn't mean that they're all going to register on the 15th, but that's when the online window begins for kindergarten registration.
All right.
I'll get my month straight here shortly.
All right. Next item on discussion items is proposed schedule change. And I believe we have Don Scott here to present that for us. Is that right?
Dan Barnes is going to present.
Okay.
And I will support. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So Dawn did an excellent job giving you kind of the background of why this is needed. So let me just briefly talk about it, and then I want to kind of flesh it out with my own thoughts, and then I'll open it up to any questions that we could answer. So what we are proposing is for the middle school and the high school to have a 1 hour early release 1 day per week. Not every day. We're not proposing changing because we couldn't do that. Middle school and high school students have to go longer than elementary school students do by about 50, a minimum of 50 hours. So if you were to survey 1,000 teachers from Tipp, from Bethel, from Troy, from wherever, and you ask them the one thing that an administrative team, a board could give them to make their job better, of those 1,000, and I'm just guessing, it wouldn't be technology, it wouldn't be less kids, it would be time. Hattie made as a researcher, he did this big giant compendium of instructional strategies that affect things that schools can do that will positively affect instruction. And one of the top ones is collaboration. our middle school and high school teachers do not have time to collaborate. The elementaries do, which I think is wonderful. They need it. They are the ones that identify kids that are struggling. They are the ones that put plans in place that hopefully by the time they get to middle school, they're not needed as much. At the middle school and high school level, and I know Mrs. Juarez isn't here, but I worked with her for 10 years, so I can at least speak a little bit for her. We work together to get that in our previous district, that collaboration time. And I can speak as a teacher on that team. We had a collaboration time. We identified a weakness. We attacked the weakness within our classrooms and we affected positive change. That positive change doesn't necessarily show up in test scores. It can, but it doesn't always. It shows up in quality of education. So what we are proposing is an hour a week for, and let's be honest, it wouldn't be an hour. The kids would be leaving an hour early. It takes time to get people from, if they have outside duty, into their meeting, if they're coming from the middle school to the high school, to vertically align. 45 minutes per week for collaboration. That's what we're proposing. I don't think there's, in my opinion, this is something that can be done with a minimal financial investment. We would probably have to pay the bus drivers another hour because they'd be coming in an hour earlier. So that would be in my opinion, the only financial investment that the district would have to make, but the rewards would far outweigh the cost, in my opinion. Question? I mean, Dawn did a fabulous job with the summary. I wasn't gonna go over all the points.
Anybody wish to ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Maines?
Do all the teachers like that idea, or have you consulted with the
Well,
teachers?
I have not, and here's why. I didn't want to present them with this idea and it not be approved by the board, because I don't want to give them I'm working to get collaboration time and then not be able to do it and to disappoint them. I would rather give them this gift and say, here's how I'm going to organize it, than to say, here's the idea and then snatch it away.
How about the parents? They've got, some involvement too with their schedules. How's that going to impact them?
Well, in my opinion, I can speak for the middle school, but I can speak more for the high school. At the high school, I don't see it being as much of an issue. Middle school, it might be, especially sixth graders. And that would be something we would have to roll out and explain the benefits of it to the community.
Anyone else?
I'm addressing, I didn't know, okay, so I'll just ask one
You
question.
address us.
Yeah. So, a couple things. To me, not to use a big word, but this seems like a nuclear option. And by nuclear, I mean, how did we get to this point? Were there other ideas that came up, or to me, this is nuclear, to let 1,400 kids, right, out of school. And I think about sixth graders walking home, and I read the thing about the sports. We're gonna have somebody, doing kind of like keeping the kids there, so you're not walking home, going back to the middle school, going to basketball practice. I understand that. I just think this is gonna be a hard sell, telling 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade parents that your kid is now gonna be home an hour early because parents work. So then you're more worried about your child. I would think an easier option would be letting them sleep an extra hour, because kids this age especially, they're on their phones too much at night, or they're busy doing homework, going to sporting practice. They get home late, they shower late, they do their homework late. Sleeping in instead of coming home an hour earlier, I don't want to say less trouble, but I would rather, as a working parent, know that my child is home sleeping an extra hour instead of walking home after school, getting in trouble at Dairy Queen, this kind of thing. I'm not saying kids are going to get in trouble, but that's one thing that came to my mind. And another question specifically, how many students are we talking about? 504 meetings, IEP meetings, IAT. Out of the 1,400 kids, how many kids are we talking about?
So let me address the
Yeah.
timing of it
Yeah.
first.
Sure.
In order to have a delayed start,
Mhm.
that would almost necessitate a delayed start for elementary.
That's right.
Oh,
Because of bus routes.
true.
And that's
true.
why we thought the afternoon made a little more sense, because then it doesn't interfere with bus routes. Because if we release them earlier, the buses are done and ready to pick up the elementary school kids.
Mhm.
That was the rationale between the afternoon or the morning.
Okay.
And in terms of 504s, IATs, and all of that,
Mhm.
are you asking how many kids
Well,
are
we're
on?
because we're letting 1,400 kids out, so we're taking 36 academic learning hours away from each student.
Mhm.
So if I'm a parent that doesn't have a child on a 504 who requires an IEP meeting, I'm thinking, well, I want that 36 hours back for my child. So how many students are we talking, how many students are impacting the decision to let 1,400 students out early every Wednesday?
In my opinion, the 504 IEP numbers are not impacting this decision at all.
Okay, that's what it says in here.
That's something we could
Okay.
use that time for,
Okay.
because right now my staff does not have time
Mhm.
during the day. If we're gonna have an IET meeting, which we don't have a lot of at the high school, they have more at the middle school and definitely at the elementary school. If we have a 504 and not an IEP, because they schedule those during the day. If we have a 504 meeting and I need my counselor, myself, and 2 teachers, it has to be after school. And then we run into how long after school can I keep them?
Yes.
And that is in their contract. So the benefit, that's a small part of the benefit. The bigger benefit is improving instruction for all of our students.
Mhm.
So my English teachers can meet and discuss best instructional practices for all levels of English students.
Mhm.
My IEP teachers can meet and talk and brainstorm accommodations for students in instructional matters. Math teachers can meet, how do we improve our geometry or algebra scores? So it's not just an IEP 504 issue, it is a collaboration for all teachers.
Okay, so the other thing is we just negotiated the teachers, the TCEA bargaining contract, like maybe almost a year ago. And so they do have collaboration time built into their contract. By the day, I forget how many minutes, is it 40 minutes a week? It's not a lot.
That's planned time.
Playing time. So this is, okay.
This
that's
would not be
time.
planned time.
Right, so my question is, does this require an MOU or how is this? No,
No, this is within the contractual
Yeah.
day.
okay. Oh, yeah, because we're letting them out an hour early.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and so, did we think about hiring like a sub or anything to come in instead of letting all the kids out an hour early, or the subs could come, because subs are 120, maybe like $125 a day.
Mhm.
So was that a consideration? How many subs to, you know what I'm saying? If we have a sub come in and then we don't have to send the kids home,
Well, if we
Don't have to do
were
the bus driver thing?
to bring in a sub, I
it
would
take more
need,
than one.
right, I would
Right,
need, I
absolutely.
have 6, 7, 8, I can't think offhand how
Gotcha.
many's in the department. I would need 8 subs for them all to be able to
Gotcha,
meet. So at 100,
gotcha.
I know it's more than 100, but at $100
Yeah.
a day, that's 800.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
So a question, my final question. I guess, let me see what else. I forgot my question. Does anybody, so Mr. Stefanik, I guess for one is, to me, this, if the board isn't supposed to get involved in day-to-day operations, this is clearly a day-to-day operations. So where do you stand on this? What are your thoughts? What's your input? Because we're being asked to make a day-to-day operations decision, and we're not supposed to be doing that. So that's kind of my concern too.
Okay, it might be a day-to-day operations thing, but it might also be like
Yeah, I'm just
the school calendar,
Okay.
that type of thing. What we have is based on the schedules as the buildings go up from kindergarten to the high school.
Mhm.
The elementary buildings have contractual time in their contractual day to do the collaboration type activities.
Right, Mr. Barnes mentioned that.
Yeah, and
Thank
the
you.
secondary schools just don't.
No,
And so we're looking for ideas to see how we can provide some time, to the secondary folks, so they can have, you can call them department meetings, you can call them TBTs, you can call them professional learning communities, you can call them what you need, to have that time,
Mhm.
because asking people, hey, we're gonna do this, and it's after school. Then it's just adding on to the day, and then if you run into coaches or people that are doing club activities or whatever, they can't participate.
Totally
And
get
so
that.
you're just trying to find some ideas, and this is one of those kind of ideas that has been implemented in some other school districts.
So my final question would be, before this came to the board, did anybody think about surveying all the parents, like sending a survey home for each grade band? You know, how comfortable would you be leaving your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th grader? I say not juniors and seniors because they're driving.
Right.
But how comfortable are you leaving your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grader home an extra hour every day? Because to me, I think the parents are going to have plenty to say about this. I totally see the value in collaboration. Absolutely, I do. But I'm more concerned with how our parents are going to react to having a 6th grader home an hour early when you don't get home till 6 o'clock and that child's home at 1:30. That's a big concern of mine.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunaway, is that it?
Yeah.
Mrs. Jones, did you have anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking like, is there any budge on it? Like, could it be a like bi-weekly thing instead of an every weekly thing, just to give parents a little more like buffer in it? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that an option at all?
Like
Bi-monthly, like twice a month instead.
Yeah, instead of like 4 times a month. I know, because I want them to have that time to collaborate. I get it. I was a teacher. I understand how important it is. I'm just thinking the flip side of it too, like you were talking about as a parent, like,
I would think, because I have 4 kids of my own,
yes,
I have a hard time remembering what week to take the recycling out because it's every other week.
Yes.
And I, as a parent, I would be like, okay, are they coming home? Is it
It's
this?
confusing.
Why are you not home?
yeah.
Oh, no, it
yes,
wasn't this week.
yes.
So that's why once a week, every week, I think for a scheduling purpose would make a lot more sense.
Okay.
The other option we considered, because we thought about that, and I think the parent feedback is very important, is that you can shave off time within your day and do a 30-minute a day professional development, and then you shave class time off, minutes off each period. And I've had it both ways. So at New Albany, we did late starts, early releases, and 30 minutes a day. The key was consistency for teachers. And I think the drawback of the 30 minutes a day is right when you get started, you're done and kids are coming in. It became very distracting. So we went back to the 1 hour, 1 hour and a half of the early release or delayed start. We did think about the morning, Miss Dunaway a lot, and the bus routes was the one potential problem with that of running into the bus route. So the key is consistency for high quality professional development, learning communities to work. However, that's another way that would not be an early release for students. We could work within the instructional day and reduce minutes. So it's another way. It doesn't require an early release. You're looking within the period schedule. But once again, 30 minutes a day for teachers to get in and get started with the TBTs, teacher-based teams that we're hoping to implement next year. There's a lot of data analysis that we would like teachers to do and look at and bring to their team meetings. And it just 25 minutes, it just goes so fast. So having had both models, we really thought the 50 minutes to 1 hour a week would give teachers real structured time with schedules created by the building principals to fully engage in those data meetings. So we looked at other options, but on this one.
Yep.
Anything else, Mrs. Jones?
No, they answered my other question, so.
Mrs. Zakor, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have several things. I appreciate the driving concept behind this. And I definitely appreciate your comment about sometimes it's not always about the quantity of kids in a class. It's busy work. And we know this in business. It's busy work. They task you with busy work, paperwork, this, that. It doesn't always amount to a hill of beans when you could be spending a great deal of time impacting the important things. They're distractors. And I see it like public education. I go, oh my God, I thought it was bad and healthy. you guys are really over the top. And all these, distracting, task-oriented, blah, 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 So I get that part. I appreciate the concept and need to be able to focus, the distractions not there, etc. My concern is severalfold. First of all, it would be, if I understand this correctly, taking 36 hours of education away from the student, correct? And I looked at the math down here, and it seems like it's gonna pass the test in terms of required state hours, but nonetheless, it's 36 hours of lost education time. Number two, I'm asking myself, where's the data that shows this has been impactful in other districts? I notice in public education, like so many other fields, it gets to be very trend oriented and driven. We do the trend. What was the thing that they were doing here a couple years back with the?
Oh my gosh, advisory period.
Yes, thank you. I forgot about that. And we all thought that was going to be great.
No, we all didn't.
Great. Well, some did. So I'm just saying, I really get it, because I'm one of these people that likes to have my phone off, my door, and you can see that I like to do my research. I like to think. And it's valuable. It's extremely valuable. So I get that part, but then I can't ignore the 36 hours less for the students. Then I'm also thinking there's a 72-hour extra wear and tear on our buses, because a bus coming to get them, to take them, and then the bus has to return for the real schedule, so to speak. So that's 72 extra runs. That's going to be wear and tear on our buses. No, where's my math?
No, they're just going home at a different time, but we don't add any extra runs to them. What they're doing is they'll come back, they'll be finished with the run about 3 o'clock. And the elementary runs don't start till 3:30.
Okay.
So they just have a layover.
Yeah,
while they
okay,
wait.
got it, because they're all middle school, high school. Or
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Thank you, okay. So scratch that, but then of course, the parents, they're key. I mean, we need to, I just think this is a big switcheroo without having parent input is not good. And I like the idea of how you can maybe tweak some of the numbers and periods so the kids are still there in the building. I'm also thinking about once they are, okay, here's a real life scenario. So you've got a ninth grader. He's got an extracurricular activity after school. He's going to be out, what, like two hours earlier than typical?
1 hour.
On Wednesday.
1 hour.
1 hour.
Wednesday.
1 hour, okay, so then where does that person go? Do they get on the bus and go home, or do they stay? And if they're gonna stay in the building, where do they hang out until their event starts?
So for the high school, for example, I have 4 instructional aides that I do not want to lose an hour of their pay for. They can monitor those students. It can be a study hall for an hour for those students. A lot of my extracurricular, a lot of my athletics have coaches that are not teachers, assistant coaches that are not teachers that could conceivably come in and start practice early. But we have a plan for that.
So you think you can absorb them?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't, at least at the high school level, I don't think it'd be an exorbitant number of kids that we would have to monitor.
So in quick summary, I'm gonna say is I truly get it. I'd be at the front of the parade, champion for quality time, think time, downtime, planning time. It all starts there in effectiveness. I get that. I'm just concerned about lost 36 hours. I'm concerned about the parents, what it may do to their households and their schedules. I'm questioning where's the data that says this is going to be pay off in this type of dividends. We did hire a special, an exceptional children's coordinator here to help alleviate some of these, whatever it is that person's deciding needs to be done, but that's why we added that extra staff. So anyway, I'd just like to see more data, question whether or not it could be explored in a different way, like shaving things off and rearranging. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Am I on to respond?
Go ahead.
The data is, The highest performing districts have this time, so the student achievement numbers are there to showcase that it's working, but it probably John Hattie's research, the educational leader that Dan cited, of the 5 most significant influences on student achievement: collective teacher efficacy, teacher estimates of achievement, which involves teaming, cognitive task analysis, which involves analyzing student data, and response to intervention time. The 4 out of the top 5 influences on student achievement involves teacher collaboration. So his extensive study in this area of the most significant influences on teacher achievement or student achievement all involve teacher teaming, collaboration, and data analysis. So it's there because he collectively looked across the country at school districts and at their performance and at their time and what really mattered for student achievement. So that does showcase that this matters, because you are taking away, like you said, 36 instructional hours, but what you're getting back with the teaming, the professional collaboration, the data analysis is more effective instruction in the remaining hours that we're still offering to our students. So that's the hope. You're taking away, but you're putting back to obtain hopefully greater efficiency in the instruction you're delivering. Just to respond to that, to try to.
It's one study. I've been through
Yes.
statistic crunching.
Yeah.
I get it on studies, trust me. It's a study.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Mrs. Dunaway.
Melanie, what was the financial cost to the district for the extra bus run every day for the year?
I didn't prepare that. I didn't realize that was something that I need to prepare for today.
Well,
An extra bus run.
yeah,
So we're not adding a route.
It's just it's an hour to their.
Yeah,
it's an
but-
hour.
So you're saying an hour for every day that we do this. So every week we have kids in session. 1 hour for the staff. Correct?
There
No,
is
the
no,
bus
there's
drivers.
no additional bus
There's no
run.
extra bus driver.
There is an
Right, but they're-
additional hour
and
of
They're
bus.
held
An extra
over
run.
between.
Yeah, whatever the layover time.
Yeah,
if it's
one-
an hour.
yeah.
Oh, you're
So-
paying the bus drivers.
Right,
today. Got it.
right. So, so for every Wednesday, all year, we're gonna have to pay the bus drivers an extra hour.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to know what that financial cost was to the district.
Yeah, I would have to get that actual calculation.
Okay, so I would like to have that information and
Hourly.
what? Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
So I was just trying to understand, it's 1 week, or it's per
One
week,
hour per
1
week per
hour
driver.
per week of kids. And then per driver, and then an aide would probably be on the bus, right? Well, no, not for the high school level.
It's middle school and high school,
Yeah,
Melanie.
so I don't think they have a bus aide, but I will get that information.
Any of the staff.
I can
that's
give you a
on there,
total.
check.
Yeah, so I would like to know that number, and
Okay.
I really would like to have a survey to see how parents
Mm.
6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. I'm not worried about the juniors and seniors, but grades 6 through 10, especially the middle schoolers walking home. I think parents are gonna have a lot to say about that, and maybe they're like, hey, it's great, right? I don't know.
So. I'm gonna recognize myself, everybody's going here. In the materials we provided, we're citing Vega of 2015. That appears to be, I guess, I could be wrong, Vanessa Vega was kind of summarizing all these studies, is that right?
Yeah,
Versus the actual studies themselves.
correct. The author is, it's from Edutopia, both of the facts, and statistics, but they're from several studies actually cited by Vega. So it's a collection probably of 8 to 10 studies.
And the primary, that's a Darling Hayman 2012 study.
Correct.
Okay, and then what we're talking about is the job embedded professional development essentially, and then there's the other studies, I guess, that are citing this Edutopia article.
Yes.
Okay. How many hours of professional development do we currently have at the middle school and the high school?
7, 14, 20, 42. With our professional development days, we have 3 full, 2 at the beginning, so 7 times 5, 35.
So 35 hours.
Correct. Embedded within the calendar. Am I allowed to say one more thing?
Please.
Because it's 30 to 100 hours over a 1 year period of what is often cited as the number of hours teachers need to get to what I was referring to either earlier, higher student achievement. But the key in most districts where this is working is the consistency. So we have these PD days, most districts have those. It's usually 3 throughout the year, a couple at the beginning. And those are all well and good, and we're not wanting to remove those in any way. But the key to teaming, collaboration, and consistent use of data to drive instruction involves regular meetings of some kind. So that's the key to the districts having success, and to, I think, John Hattie's research too, and the Ohio standards for high quality professional development. It all alludes to the consistency and having expectations for teachers during those meetings, which we think is important as well.
So the John Hattie's research, is that cited in this article somewhere?
No, it's not. It's John Hattie. You just type in John Hattie visible learning, 252 influences on student achievement. He's probably the most well-known in the field.
I think, no, I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Mrs. Drum?
Yeah, so can you remind me, what are the required professional development hours per year?
The required number by the state or by Tipp City?
Both.
In our contract right now, I don't know if there's a set number of PD hours that are required. No, we don't have a set number required.
Okay. That's the district I taught in, we did, so I was just curious.
No. No, based on past precedent, I know we just recently moved from the 2 hour delayed starts to 1 full.
Yes.
We're going to have 3 full next year and 2 at the beginning of the year as well in August.
Okay,
So 5. And that's pretty typical. Yeah.
Anything else?
If I could give you just one more example toward the need, if I may. When I was at Sydney Middle School as a teacher in 7th grade, we worked in teams. And one of our charges, due to a variety of issues, we were in the Ohio improvement process. And one of those things required collaboration with the teachers. So on the team, we determined through use of data and all of that, that math was an issue. We happened to have an enrichment time built in. As a team, we decided math is something we were going to tackle. Our math teacher gave lots of assessments. The rest of the team gave extra instruction on math during that enrichment time. Our math teacher's score, her value added score, and that value added is a whole complex thing, but a value added score of 0 is expected growth. That year she had a value added score of +13, which is massive. We were seeing half and almost a full year's growth out of students, not achievement. Those are 2 different things, but growth. Now that's an anecdotal observation. Clearly, we don't have an extra period in the day at the high school to attack those sort of things. I wish we did. But it illustrates the fact that collaboration can be the most powerful way to improve student success across the board. And one of the concerns that I have is that we're doing, in my opinion, a very good job of making accommodations for our lowest students. At the high school, we divide our highest students up into AP classes, and that's wonderful, but what are we doing with our middle students? How are we challenging them with the proper rigor that we need to? And if we're not asking or providing our teachers time to determine that, I think we're missing the boat. I think we can improve rigor at the high school, at least at the high school. I can't speak to Tippecanoe Middle School. Mrs. Voorhees can, probably far more eloquently than I can. But one of the things that my staff keeps asking is how can we improve rigor at the high school? I think this is the first place to start, in my opinion. That's all I have. Thank you.
I wanted to just think about all this information. I guess one thing that pops into my head is that based on what I'm looking at with what you guys are citing, one of the things they're saying, and even in your own materials, is that we're looking at, for this to work, you want sustained learning over multiple days and weeks with professional development efforts that engage our teachers in 30 to 100 hours of learning. Right now, we're at 35. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the appropriate number, but it's within that range. And so, you know, right now we're adding a lot of things that it's going to place a significant, in my opinion, burden on parents. And so, and not to mention that we only have 20 hours after that for snow days and things like that before we have to add school days, I'm guessing, because we're not going to meet that 1,001, right? So we only have 1,020, I think, after that. Right.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot. I mean, just sometimes you know, get near flooding or you know, in Tipp, and next people can't get to school, and so I just these are things that kind of pop into my head. I got kind of think about it some more. Anybody else? All right, Mrs. Recorder.
I like the concept. I recognize the motivation behind it. I guess what I would like to challenge the teams, if you will, to come up where you have the best of both worlds. I think it's a good starting discussion. I think it's a great, you're elevating the concept. And I think that from my perspective, is my one, I always like to look for the best possible, what you can, I'd say it's a preliminary start, and what can you do to try to make it all work out so that they get what the staff gets what they need. Maybe 60 minutes isn't enough. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, that's just about enough time to get out your materials, get oriented, discuss people, have a conversation, how you been, Amber? Oh, sorry to hear about your mother. Yeah, get your groove going before you really get into the nuts and bolts of what needs. So I'm questioning whether 60 minutes is adequate. Seriously, I'd rather have 90 minutes, 120, something where you can really accomplish. I've learned never confuse activity with accomplishments. They're not the same. So all this activity, what do you really accomplish? I'm just saying I'd like to challenge maybe a restructured look of this where you kind of fulfill it all. It's not being out of school, and that's an easy idea, isn't it?
Middle and high school schedules are really tough.
I mean, that's so easy to.
I think middle school is harder.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
presentation. Next item up for discussion items is 2D. This one is on a discussion items, but it's actually a recommended action. It's the facilities data resolution. The recommended action is to recommend approval to authorize the superintendent to use Ritchie Architects at no cost to the district to provide an updated cost estimate on the facilities plan from 2019 and 2020 and review the most recent renovation report from Energy Optimizers. Is there a motion?
A motion to approve the recommendation.
I will second. And so this is now open for discussion. Mr. Maines, did you want to talk about it?
No.
I'll go ahead and give a quick overview. The facilities committee got together on March 1st and met with Energy Optimizers. They provided us with a proposal. Some of the proposal items were a little bit abstract and not necessarily defined as much as I think we were hoping to see, but they had a lot of good information to us. They worked very hard to give it to us. We had requested an apples to apples comparison, and we started to discuss square footage that we would get with this new proposal compared to the old plan. And it was kind of hard to understand the cost aspects of it without understanding the updated cost with the old one as to what the price per square foot was. And it was unclear as to how much square footage would be usable space with this renovation plan. And so where the committee left it is that we were going to recommend to the school district that they approve the ability to use Ritchie Architects at no cost. Well, at the time we were going to recommend, we're gonna find out how much it would cost to have them review what the cost is and give us an updated cost estimate to the old plan. And then they offered to do that for free and also offered to look at the energy optimizers proposed renovation and let us know if it was a true apples to apples comparison as to what you're gonna get a complete renovation with the same amenities and types of infrastructure, IT, and all those things that you have with a new build, or whether there are things that are lacking. And then they're gonna come back to us and do that for free. But the facilities committee felt that that was very important to understand that before coming back to the next step. And so we all agreed that we would do that. After that, we received an email from Ridgely Architects. I think some of the board members, I think I forwarded all that to everybody. And then Mr. Stefanik relayed the same to me. And so the committee's recommendation then is to approve the superintendent to use Ridgely Architects at no cost to the districts. It's not gonna cost us anything. They're gonna provide us an updated cost of what the facilities plan was. And then also look at energy optimizers so that we truly understand whether we are getting cost savings based on getting less, or it's a true cost savings. And then also Kim Hagan, our business operations manager, and our maintenance supervisor, Clay Spencer, wanted time to really go through the report to see what they were providing, because the first time we got the report was when they were presenting it, and then that prompted a lot of questions. And after a few hours, there's still a lot to go through. So they're going to go through that. And if we approve that recommendation, then they'll have the insight from their review as well as what Ridgely provides. Are there any other questions or discussion? Mrs. Dunaway?
Yeah, I wanted to clear something up because you added this to the last board meeting because you wanted us to approve this, and then I asked the question, how much is it gonna cost? You didn't have the answer. And then I brought up erroneously, the $75,000. And I just want to let everybody know that I was incorrect because I said I'm going back on my memory, which was 2017. So it was actually $38,000. So I just wanted to let everybody know. I'm sure you read the emails.
Yes.
But I said 75,000, that was incorrect. And I was trying to get that information, no one ever got back to me because I was worried about that invoice because we received emails about it and there was never any closure. Do we owe it? Do we not owe it? So I did the same thing you guys all probably did. I went through the information that Ridgely sent us and I was a little confused on some of the contracts. A lot of it, some of it was mentioning Bruns. So I didn't know if that was Tipp Pride, like invoices or bills. I was a little confused on that. And because it was 2017, that was during all the Tipp Pride planning stuff. And I don't think this board signed up to pay for Tipp Pride, invoices or, right.
Yeah.
So that was a little confusing to me. And because we just got this, I don't know who's responsible for looking at that invoice. I really don't, but that was just something that caught my eye immediately.
Can I clarify something?
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Stefanik.
On those invoices, something I did notice
Mhm,
at the very top, the starting number
mhm.
on the invoices was 75.
And that's what I was gonna say that. It was.
That's where it started. Then they
Yep.
say like, we'll receive this payment or we did this, we did, it started
Knew
to
it
just
was-
subtract as
yeah.
it worked out. But 75,000 was a number,
On the invoice, I
on
didn't
the
notice that.
invoice.
So I just
Yeah.
want to call us back to the current one. Those previous invoices and things like that are certainly something that we need to understand and explore, but I would suggest that first, invoices that go back to 2017 and an original invoice $75,000 could result from other, independent contracts from other previous invoices and things like that. That this all happened 5 years ago. A lot of that institutional knowledge is gone.
Well, I'm still here.
It's gone or not recollected or could not have been privy to the discussions and the understanding of the itemization. And so before we say anything and attribute things to either Tipp Pride or something improper, I think, I would just urge us to say, well, if there's a concern or question about that, we should certainly investigate that. But right now, what's before the board is considering whether we want to benefit from Ridgely Architects, which from my understanding is a longstanding and good reputation for performing these types of services for school districts. We, at one point, school district felt confident to use them for these services. They would, at no cost to our district, come back and give us an update on the cost for the plan, which could enlighten us to, well, we need to do a renovation, or could say, well, it's beneficial to do the new build with the renovation of LT Ball. That was part of the plan in 2019 and 2020, which would save us some time and money. We've already invested over six figures into this architect. And to me, for them to update us on the cost as well as review the report from Energy Optimizers is a huge benefit and a huge value of the school district at literally no cost to us. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Gotcha, but before Mrs. Dunaway goes again for a second time, did anybody else have any thoughts or questions? Did you have any?
I do, but I'd rather, because I lose thoughts, so go ahead, Ms.
Go ahead, Mrs.
I can
Dunaway.
do it afterwards.
No, I wasn't accusing anybody, Simon. The Bruns thing caught my eye. It was during all the Tipp Pride stuff, and I was asking a question. So I don't want anybody to put words in my mouth or say something that I did not say. So I just want to be very clear on that. And I asked you about this at the last board meeting, and you claimed you didn't know anything about it. And it states in the emails from Richley that you were in the meetings when this invoice was discussed. So for you to sit there and act like you didn't know about this outstanding balance, I'm sorry, that's disingenuous. Well, it is, because you're mentioned in these emails.
That's not what I said. I said, I remembered something, but my recollection is that the net result of that, because I had asked about it, and the recollection of it, my recollection was that it came out to be not an issue. And I never said that, I wasn't part of any discussion or wasn't aware of any claim for an invoice. I just said my recollection was on that, and I said I could be wrong, is that there wasn't an issue. And so that's a very different statement than, I don't know of anything, or I wasn't part of any discussion or aware of any prior invoice, because what prompted that discussion in the meeting that I was referencing was my asking about the invoice. So respectfully disagree with your characterization there.
Well, and that's how I felt about you attacking me about Tipp Pride. And I don't even know why you would bring this up in October, because this was in 2017. So that's all I'm saying. I won't misquote you, but please don't do that to me as well. It goes both ways.
I think that the video speaks for itself. Right? Anybody else have anything to say?
Go ahead, get your little dig in.
Mrs. Zakor, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I do, please. I think it was about August maybe of 2021, okay. We were talking about the facilities, and there were several questions that you wrote down, Mr. Patrick, because you're on that committee. And you made a statement that I very much agreed with you or liked. You said that your number one goal as the committee person is to bring information back to the board to try to help us, be informed in what we were thinking and deciding, supporting. And so there were several questions. Unfortunately, none of those questions have been answered and circulated back to us. For example, one of the things I wanted to know was the number of elementary students that are riding the bus and where those kids live. We talked about in terms of growing demographics for the Tipp district. Are the new desired homes for the younger family with the younger kids, are they more that way towards Cedar Grove, toward Rosewood, towards where are they? I know those open floor plans are very popular. And are we losing a population base more in the center of town than the homes more in the older section? Are younger families with the kids with the younger kids, where are they migrating when they come into Tipp? Has that shifted? My guess would be that it has shifted. In fact, Mr. Patrick, you were on tape with the city council urging the approval of the Cedar Grove community, saying that you did a very intense following of real estate.
I got to call us back to the order. Hold on.
Well, it's
Point of
about
order. I got to call us back to the order of the day. The order of the day right now is not my discussion about Cedar Grove with city council that happened
Okay,
5
so
years
so
ago.
let
It's
me
the
continue.
the
then with
recommendation
this.
to approve.
Where
racial
are the
architects.
numbers? Have you provided, no, you have not provided. Where are the numbers for the elementary kids in our district? Where are they coming from? Where's the base for that?
Okay, back to the call order of the day. The order of the day right now is our agenda that we approved. If you want to discuss facilities generally and talk about the data that underlines it, you've got a request to add that to the agenda. Right now, the agenda,
Mr. Patrick,
right
that's
now, the
true.
agenda is, we have the recommended action.
You want a
If you-
rote, stop, wait, right there. You want a rote procedure.
If you want to discuss.
Board business is not about rote procedure. Mrs. Drum, myself, Mr. Maines, Mr. Stefanik, and Mrs. Fox all went to ESC, you were not there, and we learned that board business is not always rote procedure. It's discussion, discussion, discussion. You received the slide on that. This is all part and parcel. And to ask us to approve something like this puts us more in that rabbit hole with that assumptive close. And you're talking about a facility plan of 2019 and 2020, and then the most recent renovation report. I don't know what you're talking about. Renovating what? Renovating LT Ball, renovating Broadway, renovating Nevin Coppic, renovating a combination of those. You are making assumptive closes on things that haven't even been clarified by this board, and no individual acts alone. Mr. Patrick, you've said that. We act as a board. Well, this board needs to have that discussion, sir. And one of the things that I want to know is, since we are looking at desperate need for elementary, where is our elementary base as we know it today? That's easy to find by looking at our bus runs. Did you check with Mrs. Nodani? Have you given us this information? I don't recall receiving it.
First of all, the board's never instructed the committee to get that information. If the board's made a resolution directing that inquiry, we'd be glad to follow it. We've not been asked to
Oh
do
my
that.
goodness, you were at the meeting, you took the notes. Oh, come on, let's not do this. You wrote a list of things.
May I be
Simon.
excused, please?
You
while I
wrote-
use the restroom.
Yeah, you wrote a list of things.
Thank you.
One of them was to start looking at where are our elementary children. We talked about the fact it's kind of hard to talk about the walkers, but we can definitely identify the elementary kids riding our buses. We know who they are. We know where they're living. We know where we pick them up in what communities and neighborhoods. This is free, easy data that we should have already discussed months ago. Months ago. And by having that data, Mrs. Drum, I'm saying it just helps sort of navigate a little bit more where we're going with all this, where we should be going
I agree.
and getting the job
Is there a
done.
way to ask the transportation department though for that?
Oh, honey, I asked for, I'm sorry, I asked for that back
Okay,
in
cool.
August.
Awesome.
2020.
Perfect.
I
I just
said,
wanted to check.
those are our
Awesome.
numbers. We
Perfect.
don't have
We're
to
great.
hire a company for this. We just pick up the phone and get them. It's there. August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, 7 months. Okay, so for what's on the agenda, that's fair. You want to authorize to use Richley at no cost, which is great, no cost. Updated estimate on the facilities plan. I'm assuming that's an LT Ball. Yeah.
That's correct.
And are we to assume that's a K through 5, a K through 6?
K through 5.
Okay, a K through, see, these little particulars aren't even being discussed. We should all know what we're talking about. Secondly, we haven't even had a discussion on pre-K. If we're going to do facilities, shouldn't we have some visionary discussion? What are we going to do with pre-K? Do we do pre-K? Do we not do pre-K? Now is the time. You don't do afterthoughts. Oh my God, 4 years ago, I wish they would have thought about that before they put up that new building. Okay, sorry. So what is that facility, the 2019, 2020, K5, pre-K5? And then sincerely, Mr. Patrick, the most recent renovation report, well, Richley would be looking at renovating what? What would that plan be? Keeping LT Ball 4-5, just fixing up Broadway, fixing up Nevin? Where is the focus and orientation here?
I can then provide you some answering clarifications related to the plans and the renovation. And then, if it hasn't been provided to you, Mr. Stefanik, I would request that we provide the report to all board members on, that we had on March 1st here.
There was a, there was a communication, there was a communication with Ms. Hagan that we had all received hard, how.
Physical ones, yeah.
But, not that one.
The big report.
Yeah, the bigger report, Energy Optimizer said they were gonna send an electronic version. And so when the electronic version gets here, we can kick it out to the entire board.
So and I don't know how we as a facilities committee began this, because when the facilities committee was suspended because of COVID, to the point we came back after I asked who's in charge of calling it, there were already preliminary steps made to get a renovation estimate from Energy Optimizers. And we've discussed that at previous board meetings and now. But the net result of it is the board has authorized various steps related to that renovation, including hiring a structural engineer to evaluate whether Broadway and Nevin Coppic were structurally sound for renovation. And then other items. The most recent renovation report provided by Energy Optimizers included a renovation of Nevin Coppic, Broadway, and Tipp Central, including asbestos abatement, upgrading it to contemporary infrastructure, as well as air conditioning and things of that nature. And so that was done at no cost to the school district by Energy Optimizers. Again, how we started on that road is not clear to me, but this is where we are. So now, when the committee was looking at this, the thought was we come back to the school district board and say, here's what we've got. Where do you want to go based on this renovation project? And then we would provide a recommendation if we had one. The issue is that we don't feel like we have all the information needed to provide the board with an apples to apples comparison, which was essentially so that we understand before we abandon a plan that we spent several $100,000 on, that we understand that where we're going next, it's either the board wants to completely abandon, start from scratch, or they want to do a renovation, or they want to resurrect it. For the board to be able to make that decision, the facilities committee has just been trying to get the information required for that. Part of that is having registered architects review the cost estimates on the traditional plan of 2020. The plan of 2020 is essentially the plan of 2019 that was presented but not officially approved by the OFCC. But in 2020, the OFCC had made a verbal commitment to that plan where we wouldn't have to tear down the school. And so, well, we'd have to tear down one school, but not the middle school. And it would be K through 5. And so with the wraparound around LT, as it had been presented in 2019 to 5, as far as what the plan was including. It would still require abatement and something to be done with Broadway and Tipp Central. And so that's essentially at this point, Richley has agreed, and also the current administration does not have a full understanding of the previous plan from 2020 because of lack of institutional knowledge, because Gary Fisher, who was the operations manager, is no longer here. We also lost, Dr. Kumpf, who was part of it. We lost Mr. Stevens. And I don't know if Mr. Veerhoff was involved, but so essentially we've got all new staff and new committee members, because I wasn't part of the facilities committee until the tail end, or really the beginning of 2020, and it didn't convene very long because of the COVID crisis or pandemic. So this is going to provide us the opportunity to educate the entire committee as to what the previous plan was, and then come back to the board with all that information. And so that's what this entails.
And here's where this plan is, this whole thing is lost. You've done your base foundation homework. Starting with some very key questions. Where are our elementary kids trending in Tipp City? The reason that's an important question is because once you know that data, where are they trending? Is there any significant shift? Then you start talking about the comprehensive dialogue would be things like your bus runs, very costly, expense for a district, your bus runs, walkers, etc. You may gain in minimizing your bus runs, but then what do you do if you put a facility somewhere that offsets the walkability? There's a lot of base work discussions that have been sort of drifted off for months. Could have been done, I think. So I like the elementary stuff, ASAP. The second thing is we should be having the discussion. We should have already had this discussion and a vision of what we're going to do with kindergarten and pre-K for this district. It's really valid. It's relevant. It's important. It's important from education. It's important for childcare. It's important in looking at facilities and resources and where we're going to grow. It's just important. We talk about, we just keep talking about these plans as if that's not a factor. It's a huge factor. We have a great resource, Mrs. Waldron, the TSEP. Great resource to talk to us about the pre-K, the pre-K and what we're going to do. These conversations should have honestly already been had, but let's start hitting it hard, get on there. We can have her come in and talk to us. Where's our community on this? Pre-KK, what's the cost factors? I don't know. And what would be the alternatives? So when you talk about the renovation report, yes, it was quite big, and I asked for it, I received it, but so what? Nobody scaled it down into a dialogue. Nobody has scaled that down into a conversation of the application. How is that applicable, that renovation report, to the real world of our circumstances in our community? We're not having that. We've not had that dialogue. So when we're talking about renovating what? We're going to renovate or Broadway? Are we going to renovate and expand Broadway? Are we going to move a board office over there? We're going to sell. There's a lot of things that should be discussed here. I don't see that my experience in working with some very large projects, the base work, we're just sort of jumping in, and it's not methodical in my opinion. I just want to see more method into the base of this.
Thank you, Mrs. Court.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Doe, I think you've already gone once on this. Mrs. Drum, did you have anything you want to say or add?
No.
Mr. Mays, did you have anything you want to say or add?
Yes, I was at that committee meeting. I saw the reports that were given, and my number one concern is I want updates on those numbers that were generated 2-3 years ago. Costs have gone up. I want to see details, and that's what we're asking Ridgely to do. They're willing to do it at no cost. I appreciate that. At least give me something. I need a place to start.
But what update on which one, Mr. Means? No, just for clarity, you're talking about the LT ball thing?
Yes.
The what, K through 5?
Yes,
Okay.
and I like the idea that Ridgely is willing to review the work that was done by energy optimizers.
Put that in today's dollars.
Yes,
Well, I think on the energy optimizers review is to let us know whether it's truly an apples to apples comparison.
yes.
In other words, are we getting the same thing?
But my final plea is while you're doing that, because that is part of that base of data, but while you're doing that, certainly tackle these other questions as well.
I believe we will be, but we got to start someplace.
I
We gotta get
understand, but
going.
I like more expediency. This has been dragging on now for two years.
That's why I want to get it going.
It doesn't cost that much to gather information.
Anybody else? All right, Mrs. Dunaway.
So twice in this conversation, you've mentioned institutional memory. And it's pretty disrespectful to me, Simon, because you said there is no institutional memory. I have hundreds of hours in this project, hundreds. I've met with Ridgely, OFCC. Heck, I've taken time away from my family to spend a day at Columbus when this district got in trouble with OFCC. And we had to go there with an attorney. I was in that meeting. I've sat in meetings with all the people that you mentioned, and Steve Ehrhoff was not part of this. You left out one person, Jim Segona. Jim Segona, myself, Liz, Gary Pfister, Dr. Cum, hundreds of hours. So that's rude and disrespectful. And you've never even asked me a question. You've been on facilities for 2 years now. And then in January at the organizational meeting, you assigned yourself and Rick to facilities. So that's fine. But because nobody wants my institutional memory, I'll give you three things right now. In this plan that you're looking to have Ridgely redo, which I agree with you, Rick, we have to start somewhere. I get that. We need new buildings. But nobody has even asked the general question, do we even want this plan? Do we even like this plan? The teachers did not like the open gym. I can tell you exactly why we did it. I was in that meeting. Oh, but I don't have any institutional memory, according to Simon. The other thing, traffic. We had our community vote on this plan when we didn't even give them the traffic study. Good luck with the traffic here. Good luck. And I brought this up at a meeting with Mr. Patry, and I said, we have traffic issues at that location. Mr. Patry and I disagreed. He said there's no traffic issues at the LT Ball Middle School campus. I said, yes, Simon, I take my kids to school in the morning, to the high school. I drive by that. It is a nightmare. So I would have to argue with that. There are a lot of traffic concerns, and we already know that the traffic isn't going to work there. We have the report, but nobody wants to look at it. Nobody wants to be honest. I don't know why we are stuck on this 2019-2020 plan. And the other thing is lunch. We never figured out lunch. So institutional memory, I would love to share, but no one's asked me. Open gym, traffic, and lunch. So there you go. And I would involve, this time, I would involve the teachers, because we didn't involve the teachers in this.
Absolutely.
We forged ahead and plotted ahead without getting our staff input, which is beyond rude, disrespectful. We made them feel unvalued, which why wouldn't they feel? They feel the same way I feel right now. I have 200 hours into this project, 7 years, and according to Mr. Patry, there's no institutional memory left in the district. Myself and Liz Robbins are the only two that were on this original plan. So there you go.
Who's the teacher on the committee, the facilities committee?
Right now, a facility, I will tell you the whole facilities committee. It's comprised of Mr. Stefanik, Mrs. Fox, Miss Robbins, Mr. Maines, myself, Mr. Spencer, and Miss Hagan.
So no teacher.
Which is the mistake we made last time. We didn't involve the staff at all. Joelle and Heather Lee and I tried desperately to get staff involvement. It was an uphill battle, and it was a very last minute decision to save face. And that might be another reason the plan failed. And I go back to this. Who was even married to this plan? No. Again, I can tell you exactly how it happened. It happened in 4 days. 4 days we came up with this plan. It was not a good plan. Nope. Not at all.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunaway. All right, anybody else? Mr. Stefanik?
I can share some background information from plans I've been involved in. I'm fully open to having teachers on the committee. I was involved in processes that after we got to the point where there was a decision made on trying to get square footage and what we were going to do. And once we had the architect on board, the teachers were completely involved in what you would call the educational specifications. So you figure out that you can get a building of X thousand square feet, in the project, and that's your goal. And then the teachers get involved with the architect to actually create what that space looks like, on the inside of the building. And so again, at whatever point the district wants to involve teachers, that is fine. But I've always been involved in building projects where the teachers were involved. It's not just the project I was involved in. We actually had the entire staff of the building that was going to inhabit the new school. They were all there putting their ideas in and brainstorming, coming to consensus on what that building was going to look like.
Because if not, you end up with, guess what? An open gym that the teachers don't want.
Didn't want-
So there you go.
Mrs. Zakor.
And I very much appreciate that. My vocal plea would be, don't wait and delay until the architect. No, teachers, and not just a teacher, a vocal, outspoken, experienced, knows the lay of the land, teacher, ground zero. That architect should be driven by the teacher. The architect should not be driving the teacher. The teacher should be driving the architect.
And that's the process.
And the reason I say ground zero, because they're the ones, when you talk about institutional knowledge, Henry, the complaints from the parents, the traffic, the daycare, the whatever it may be, the playground too big, the so-and-so's wandering, whatever it may be.
Yeah. There's no fence in the playground. We lost Billy again.
We have just now shown,
Damn, Billy.
I don't know how to say this. The fact that this administrative top-heavy facility team should be flipped the other way, and it should be more heavy by the users of that facility. The people you name, they're not gonna be over there, wherever that is. You put the people that are utilizing the facility more in those positions of input and ideas and challenges. And let them know they're safe. They're safe to speak out on it, that it's expected. And if you're not willing to speak out, then don't be a part of this.
Mrs. Dunaway.
Mr. Sponik, I just have a final question for you, since Simon and I had a little disagreement way back when. Have you had anybody reach out to you regarding the traffic, the current traffic? And keep in mind, we haven't even added Broadway over there yet. But have you heard any traffic issues? Because I said there were, Simon said there weren't. We got in a little tiff.
You mean with the traffic study or with traffic over there?
Right now, as we speak. Okay,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah,
So I was right. We have traffic issues now. So imagine what happens when we add Broadway potentially. What? We're just gonna add 400 more students over there and all these parents dropping off their, are you kidding me? This is a recipe for disaster.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunaway. Just want to say that first, the traffic issue, there is a traffic study, and that traffic study and that report provided a recommended course of action that would make the traffic then in line with what's generally accepted for a school district and for traffic flow. And so when I say there's no, well, that's how I understood.
I sat in that meeting and I disagree.
Okay, so
I sat in that
So
meeting here in this office.
it's certainly possible that I'm misunderstanding that response or that result, or that you don't agree with what I'm saying based on if I'm correct in my recollection. But that is not yet been determined. And so I just want to just remind everybody here, right now, all we're trying to figure out is that the facilities committee has taken steps to give this board a few options related to addressing our facilities needs. Does not mean that the board has to follow it. It's just going to give the board some information. One of those things is including renovating Broadway, Nevin Coppic, and Tipp Central to address our facilities needs, and how that finally look like, whatever, I don't know. It's going to address a certain number of square footage in classrooms along with modern infrastructure. The other is to understand what the old plan was and how much it costs in today's dollars. Doesn't mean we have to pursue that either. And so all the other items that you're raising are certainly things that we can bring up at that time. Right now, all we're asking, and only that's for the boards, whether we're okay with not spending any money to get an update on those costs and have somebody who's a professional look at the renovations to see whether we're getting true apples to apples or whether there are things we're missing, because we don't know as much as they do. And so, and when I say lack of institutional knowledge, I'm not saying there's a complete void of it. I'm just saying it's not what it used to be.
You said nobody was here.
Well,
I'm sitting right here.
In the
Last time
present,
I checked, I'm still a person.
in the present facilities committee, other than Ms. Robbins, my understanding is that Ms. Robbins was part of it. I was part of it for 3 months before everything got switched over. So I think it'd be very useful to have them come in and educate the committee as a whole. So any other comments or questions or concerns?
My final comment is I do understand your intent for wanting this cost-free cost analysis. I totally get that. But my final comment is, we talked about the bus riders, where are they located? We talked about pre-K, we talked about teachers being the team from ground up. And I just don't like it because it's just gonna end up being talk. And nothing, and then we're gonna have another meeting, another couple more meetings. And I like to see action steps on this. And if that requires me making a motion, I'll do that, but I'd like to see action steps.
Go ahead, Mr. Stefanik.
I don't put that on the board or the facilities committee. I've got the items down on the paper here and we'll begin addressing those first thing tomorrow.
The bus riders that we asked for like
That's the
6
first
months ago, and then what was the other thing that you have on your paper?
I got discussion about the preschool,
K.
potential for preschool
K.
and how in preschool K,
Thank you.
are partnered in Tipp City, and I've got
Teachers.
well, I've got that already. But then the specifics about the renovation program. And you've got one of the is that there's a second one that goes into more detail. When we get that electronically, we'll send that out to the board as well.
And not to be a smart aleck here, but when we talk about the renovation project for Broadway, well, what is that project? Is it K through 3? Is it 2 and 3? I mean,
Yeah, that's well, and that's
you don't have the structure defined.
figuring out the spaces.
Yes.
That's when you have to talk about what each site becomes once it gets renovated.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would just add one thing, I'm just getting started on it. And I always listen to the teachers and the parents and the community. So that's important to me. But we gotta start someplace. I've got 4 little grandkids coming up. I wanna get this thing started.
I want to fix it for the teachers who've been in these buildings with no boilers for how many years? I mean, let's help them out here. My goodness.
I think we're ready for a vote.
Maines,
Yes.
Patry,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Dunaway,
No,
and Zakor.
No, because I don't know what the renovation report, what they're gonna be assessing. Determined.
All right, motion passes. Next item is item 3A, executive session. I would entertain a motion to adjourn executive session for the purposes authorized under Board of Education Policy 166 and ORC 121.22 G1 to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee. We would be inviting Mr. Stefanik into the executive session. We do not anticipate any official action to be taken. Is there a motion?
I make the motion.
I'll second.
All right. Drum and Zakor, is any discussion? Having no discussion, can we call the vote, please?
Drum.
Yes.
Zakor,
Yes.
Dunaway,
yes.
Maines,
Yes.
Patry.
Yes, motion passes. We are now adjourning to executive session. The time is 7:50 PM.
3 minutes.
Well, you want to adjourn the meeting first for 3 minutes? Is that what you're asking?
No, as we're transitioning into executive session, can we have 3 minutes?
Yeah, I'd like to go.
Declare us now out of executive session. The time is 8:03 PM. Next item is upcoming meetings. Our regular meeting will be Monday, March 21st at 6 PM here at the Board of Education office. And following that, we will have a work session on Monday, April 11th, 2022 at 5 PM here at the Board of Education office. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second,
All right. Motion's adjourned by Mrs. Zakor, Mrs. Dunaway. Any discussion? Ready for the call?
Zakor,
Yes.
Dunaway,
yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Maines.
Do we have to?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
I'm also a yes.
I figured you were fine.
I'm sorry, Maines Patriot. I apologize.
And, all right. Motion passes, we are adjourned.